Chapter 905. Thank you for your hard work. Ling Xiao put the demon bone in his interspatial ring and turned around to look at the people behind him. Although he looked calm, he didn't hide the coldness in his eyes. All the blood guards had died in today's battle. Even Xiao, Beifa, Huaheng, and Mi Yong have been killed by the Divine Master. All the Divine Emperors and great monsters of the Sea region and the monster race have been killed. Not to mention the Divine Kings and Divine Marquises who followed Liang, Yi, and Ning Tiance. Of course, Ling Xiao understood why Ling Tianlin hadn't attacked yet. Yi Luoyun wouldn't show up unless he and the Divine Master were both severely injured. If she were to escape today, even if her demon core was shattered, with this ancestor of the Yi clan's methods and ambition, she would become a huge threat to the Ling clan sooner or later. Ziyin, Sect Master. Ling Xiao raised his head and glanced at the two of them. Today's battle was simply too tragic. Go and help everyone erase this painful memory. Yes, my lord. Ziyin and Sect Master Taishian looked at each other, then turned around and walked toward the crowd. Although most of the people present had submitted to Ling Xiao, there was still a small number who hadn't been imprinted with the soul seal. If they wanted to betray him, Ling Xiao wouldn't be able to detect it. Even though the Ling people were now the lord of the Shenzhou state, they had to be more careful at times like this. After today's battle, Ling Xiao had a deeper understanding of those ancient experts. No matter how loyal they were in the past, their schemes and methods could be said to be shocking. With Ling Xiao's current strength, it would be difficult to control such a person. So, if he wanted to go against the heavens and kill the deities, he had to gather his own subordinates. Also, they had to be recognized by the system. Then, he wouldn't have to worry about them betraying him or being someone else's pawn. Xiao, what should we do with this person? Xian Yuanyue was dressed in a red robe and had a beautiful figure. She was looking at Yi Zhu calmly. With the foundation of the Xian Yuan clan, whether it was the Foley Ace or the Ling people, tens of thousands of years ago, the Xian Yuan clan was the true emperor clan of the human race. Although the Xian Yuan people had declined and were imprisoned by the immortals in the Azure region, in the eyes of many human forces, the master of the Xian Yuan people was still the emperor of the human race. As the legitimate daughter of the Xian Yuan people, the moon of Xian Yuan had always been respectfully addressed as the empress. Therefore, in her eyes, the ancestors of the Foley, the vassals of the immortals, not only did they not have any power, they were no different from traitors and lackeys. Qingshan? Ling Xiao shook his head and smiled. He turned to look at Yi Qingshan, only to see her calm expression. Even her tone was extremely indifferent. I have nothing to do with the Foley Ace. Yi Qingshan, you ungrateful bastard. You are a descendant of my family of Foley Ace, but now you are siding with the Sky Demon. Shut up. Yi Qingshan shouted coldly. There seemed to be a cold glint in her eyes. Around her, ice crystals condensed and sealed the world. Although you are a demon, you do things righteously and save the common people. Foley Ace? The Foley Ace falsely accused me and imprisoned me here. You almost killed me. In my eyes, the so-called vassals of the immortals are even more shameless. You caused Qingqiu to lose her eyes. You will pay for it with your eyes. Ling Xiao smiled warmly, but his words made Yi Luoyun's expression freeze. She felt a chill in her heart. How terrifying was this young sky demon? He was obviously cold-blooded and cruel. He used the lives of the common people to forge his path to immortality, but he acted righteous and awe-inspiring. He played the common people in the palm of his hand. Yi Luoyun still did not know the background of the Ling people. In the past 1,000 years, she had almost never contacted the Foley Ace because she wanted to achieve her goals. But Ling Tianlin alone was enough to make her feel terrified. It was hard to imagine how the 9 heavens, 10 earths, and billions of planets would be turned upside down once the demon stepped out of the Shenzhou state and was no longer bound by the heavenly law and had the Sky Demon's former subordinates following him. It's time to end it. Ling Xiao looked up at the mountain in the distance. The entire Divine Mountain was full of holes at the moment. The ground within 1,000 miles was shattered and the sky cracked. Even further away, There was an unparalleled sword while opening and closing, vast and mighty in the sky. After this battle, the sacred sect no longer existed. But since Ling Xiao wanted to go to the upper world, he had to hide what happened there. Plop! Suddenly, there was a rain of blood in front of everyone, and Zhou Yindao fell from the sky. Meng Yuan was stunned. She turned her head and looked away with a complicated and painful look in her eyes. The Divine Master was no longer as handsome as before. His body was covered with sword wounds, and blood was flowing like a river. Even with his venerable cultivation, he couldn't stop the sword intent from corroding his body. He was like an animal waiting to be slaughtered, breathing heavily. Shower. Ling Tianlin stood in the sky with his hands behind his back. His eyes were calm, but there was a hint of complicated emotion in his eyes when he looked at the moon of Xianyuan occasionally. Ancestor Yi and the Divine Master were like fish on a chopping board. The Shengzhou state was doomed, which meant that Ling Xiao and the moon of Xianyuan would return to the upper world and part ways with him. He had a clear conscience in his life. He had a clear conscience about his mission and his race, but he had let her down. Father, mother, please wait for me for a few days. Xiao Qian, Xionghuan, clean up the Divine Mountain and set up a memorial for all the people who died in this battle. Ling Xiao turned to Yi Luoyan. Ancestor Ye's divine soul had been sealed, but her temperament couldn't be controlled by Ling Xiao. What do you want to do? The deities won't let you go. Is that so? Ling Xiao smiled and stretched out his hands. Clear light flowed from his fingertips, and he took Yi Liyun's eyes. You will regret this sooner or later. You will all regret this. Yi Liyun's eyes were bleeding, and she screamed in pain. Just as Ling Xiao was thinking about how to deal with her, Ling Tianlin landed beside him. Yi Luoyun isn't deity after all, an ancestor of the Foliaceae. She must have a token from the deities. We can't kill her for now. Father, you mean the Shengzhou state needs someone to protect it. I will stay here and suppress this person. Father? Ling Xiao frowned and looked at Ling Tianlin in surprise. The Shengzhou state was barren and lacking in the order of the heavenly Tao. With Ling Tianlin's talent, as long as he walked out of this world, he would have the hope of reaching the peak. But he was willing to stay in the Shengzhou state alone. Perhaps there was something in his heart? You don't have to say more. I am already invincible in my generation at the age of 20. Now that you are 20, I hope you will be invincible in this world. Someone will come to pick you up when you go to the upper world. By then, you will know all the plans of the Ling people. Ling Tianlin sighed and looked at the moon of Xianyuan. Then he picked up Yi Luoyun and disappeared. From the beginning to the end, neither of them spoke. Even Ling Tianlin did not look at Ling Tian. If he did not go to the upper world, the moon of Xianyuan would definitely protect Ling Xiao with the power of the deities. Everything in the past should stay in the Shengzhou state. Moreover, he had to protect the Shengzhou state and become Ling Xiao's last resort. Ling Xiao sighed in his heart. Now he understood that his parents could not have fallen out because Ling Tian's elixir ocean was dug out. It was even possible that Ling Tian's birth was to help him hide his identity. But no matter what, Ling Xiao could not interfere with their relationship. Perhaps one day, when they were old, they would let go of the grudge in their hearts. When Ling Tian was far away, Ling Xiao lowered his head and looked at Zhou Yin in front of him. The dignified Divine Master, supreme and supreme, had become a prisoner in the blink of an eye. The cruelty of the immortal path was evident. Divine Master, do you have anything else to say? Chapter 906. Oomph. The winner takes all. This time, I'm the loser. Zhou Yindao's expression was indifferent. He didn't go mad like Yi Luoyan. Perhaps, as early as 300 years ago, when he killed Yi Qingshan, he had foreseen that this day would come. The Shengzhou continent was the immortal's cage. Since he was a demon, he couldn't escape. Sooner or later, he would become everyone's target. As expected of the Divine Master, Ling Xiao nodded calmly, but he wasn't in a hurry to kill him. Whether it was the Divine Master's laws or cultivation, they were great supplements for Ling Xiao. However, his main body was refining the dragon's soul. This body couldn't fuse with the demon bone and devour laws yet. so he could only wait for a few days. In the ruins of the Divine Mountain, the god emperors of the four territories looked at Ling Xiao. Those who hadn't had their memories erased by Zi Yin and sect master Taishian were at a loss. Rouge, distribute the spiritual treasures and fortune to those who have done well. Build a sacred mountain and sacred palace. Announce to the world that all cultivators above the divine king realm are to come here and worship in 10 days. Those who don't will be killed. Mother, please heal Qingqiu's eyes. Ling Xiao scanned the crowd. In the end, he put Zhou Yindao into the ancient glazed pagoda and disappeared. At the same time, golden light shot into the sky from the depths of the realm, causing all 10 meridians to hum. One could see two figures intertwining with each other in the area covered by the golden light. Yin and Yang Qi flowed apart, as though they had entered an extremely mysterious state. Time passed slowly. 7 days later, tribulation lightning suddenly fell from the sky, almost covering the entire realm. Countless bolts of lightning roared, destroying heaven and earth. This lasted for an entire day. Ling Xiao felt his blood surge under the refinement of the thunder dragon soul. Endless celestial aura flowed through his veins. The red vertical mark between his eyebrows had long disappeared. It was replaced by an ancient rune that flickered with celestial light. At a certain moment, Ling Xiao's eyes suddenly opened, and there seemed to be huge stars blooming in them. Within a radius of 1,000 miles, spiritual energy buzzed, and celestial scenery rose and fell. Endless strange phenomena appeared around him. Ninth grade divine emperor realm, Time Dao Law. His spiritual soul, which was originally suppressed, had reached the 9th grade venerable realm. He was only one step away from the sage realm. At this moment, Ling Xiao had a faint feeling that he could turn the entire Xingzhou into dust at any time if he wanted to. By his side, Qi'er's pretty face was rosy, and there seemed to be a wisp of pain between her brows. However, at that moment, her body had stopped collapsing and the aura on her body had stabilized. She had even entered the level of an emperor god. Even his providence had reached a terrifying 10,000 points. Ling Xiao had already devoured 80 to 90% of the ancestral dragon's soul essence. At this moment, there was still an immeasurable amount of divine power in his meridians and core C that he had yet to refine. However, as long as Zhou Yindao did not die, Ling Xiao would always feel uneasy in his heart. Buzz. With a thought, Ling Xiao suddenly disappeared on the spot. When he reappeared, he was already in the ancient glazed pagoda. At this moment, Zhou Yindao was sitting cross-legged on the ground. Although his core C, spiritual power, and spiritual soul had been sealed by Ling Tianlin, the domineering aura on his body could not be changed. Divine Master. Ling Xiao's expression was gentle as he walked in front of Zhou Yindao. Even if his cultivation was not sealed at this moment, Ling Xiao was still confident that he could defeat him in a battle. The body of the sky demon and the ancestral dragon's soul essence were enough to crush all living beings in the Xingzhou. Suddenly, Ling Xiao felt that Zhou Yindao's immortal path seemed to be somewhat similar to his. It was just that the fortune he had obtained was far inferior to Ling Xiao's. You've merged with the ancestral dragon's soul? To Ling Xiao's surprise, Zhou Yindao only raised his head and glanced at him indifferently. The calmness in his voice was like an elder who was concerned about a junior. Who exactly are you? Inexplicably, Ling Xiao felt a trace of seriousness in his heart. He seemed to see the shadow of another person on Zhou Yindao's body. However, that shadow was faintly discernible and blurry, and was not present in his memories. Who am I? I'm your co. Zhou Yindao smiled sinisterly. His figure suddenly swept out, wanting to pounce towards Ling Xiao. At this moment, Ling Xiao suddenly slashed out with the demonic sword in his hand and pierced his heart, devouring all his bloodline and spiritual power. But, surprisingly, there was no trace of pain on Zhou Yindao's face at this moment. His expression was inexplicably numb. Then, before Ling Xiao could do anything, he directly shattered his spiritual soul. Ling Xiao narrowed his eyes. At the last moment, he clearly saw a wisp of Zhou Yindao's hidden aura. 3 lives, sacred body. Buzz. The Taichu divine talisman produced a demonic glow and absorbed the fragments of Zhou Yindao's spiritual soul into his soul sea. Ling Xiao also merged and refined the Dao laws in his body. Among them, Ling Xiao had not comprehended the Dao laws of life and Dao laws of space before. System, complete the Dao laws. Add a point to the Xiantian ancient scripture. Boom! In just a few days, Ling Xiao had already accumulated 300,000 villain points. With a roar, thunderclouds began to move in the sky above the ancient pagoda. In the depths of the thunderclouds, there seemed to be a wisp of demonic wool quietly rippling. It turned into a divine figure standing in the sky, overlooking the world. Next to Ling Xiao, there were 2 Dharmakayas deriving endless Tao intent. One of them had gathered all the spiritual aura of heaven and earth. It was the pure purple aura. The other one had finally completely solidified and revealed the immortal chaos. At a certain moment, the 3 Dharmakayas opened their eyes at the same time. The void within a radius of 1,000 feet collapsed and shattered on its own. The 3 Dharmakayas gradually merged and turned into one person who occupied the void. It absorbed the spiritual aura, developed Tao patterns, and cultivated immortality. The Xiantian ancient scripture complete. Another 3 days passed. During these 10 days, countless people in the Shenzhou continent walked out of the territory of the sects, clans, and dynasties and headed for the central region. The bloodstains on the Divine Mountain had long disappeared. Even the shattered Divine Palace had been restored to the top of the mountain. There was a sea of people in front of the Divine Palace. Countless people were eagerly waiting with pious eyes. In just a few days, the story of Lord Ling Xiao leading the God Emperors of the 4 territories to kill the true demon Divine Lord had spread across the world. In fact, when many people found out about this, they were all shocked and pounded their chests. If they were lucky enough to participate in the great feat of killing a god, they would definitely bring glory to their ancestors. Look, the God Emperors standing in front of the Divine Palace all had their heads held high and their chests puffed out with pride. Especially that fat guy, who had his hands behind his back, stomped his feet, shook his head, and chattered with an arrogant expression on his face, as if he was looking down on everyone. Everyone drop that beat and listen to my bragging. Don't think about those obstacles on the path of cultivation. The Battle Saint Church's leader is my brother Xiao, and the one who killed the Divine Lord is the Archling. To tell you the truth, I'm Ling Zhao's little brother, and the Archling is my daddy. Ouch! Of course, if it weren't for the rumors of Lord Ling Zhao's peerless looks, everyone would have thought that this fat guy was really the young master's little brother. Buzz. A buzzing sound spread across 10,000 miles in the sky. Golden lotuses of the great Tao bloomed one after another in the sky, and countless phenomena appeared one after another. Forests formed an ocean, stars shone brightly, flames swept across, lightning cracked the sky, and divine light lingered. At this moment, the power of heaven and earth gathered in one spot in the sky. The surroundings were completely silent while a wisp of excitement and reverence flickered in the eyes of everyone. Even the people in front of the hall bowed their heads with pious expressions. Even Xiao Bo had already knelt on one knee, lowered his head, and frowned. Behind him, the fair and clear pig head followed suit. The 2 fatties, one big and one small, knelt in front of him. It was only until a figure suddenly appeared in the divine radiance that they shouted angrily, "Welcome, my lord. My lord will live for thousands of years and be unparalleled in the world." In the air, Shir was dressed in a golden robe. Her expression was indifferent. She lowered her head and glanced at Xiao Per. The corners of her mouth curled into a faint smile. Lord Ling Xiao is a woman. Everyone was stunned, and a trace of confusion flashed across Xiao Bo's eyes. But the moment he raised his head, he saw a black-robed figure step out of the divine light and appear at the end of the sky. Smack! Chapter 907. Spiritual energy gathered in the air and turned into auspicious clouds. Divine light tore through the clouds and illuminated the mountains and rivers of the Shenzhou. A black-robed figure stood in the middle of the clouds with his hands behind his back. His face was gentle, and even the corners of his mouth were curled up in a warm smile. The tension and seriousness on everyone's faces instantly disappeared. The young master was such a gentle person. Moreover, what kind of godly appearance was this? You deserve to be the Shenzhou Lord. Inexplicably, the crowd began to stir. Some beautiful girls trembled and fainted, screaming in pain. Even with the mental fortitude of these god kings and god marquises, when they saw Ling Zhao's face for the first time, they all felt their hearts tremble. They could not suppress the surging of their blood and qi. Young master, she stood beside Ling Xiao. The immaturity on her face had faded a lot in the past few days, and there was a mature charm on her face. Let's go. Ling Xiao nodded slightly, took Shi-Er's hand, and descended from the sky. Streaks of divine light extended for thousands of miles. At this moment, the fate of the world was on their bodies. When the two of them landed in front of the main hall, the god emperors of the 4 territories, Phoenix Rouge, and the other girl stood up and looked at Ling Xiao. At this moment, they could no longer see through Ling Zhao's cultivation level. Even he gave them a sense of fear. The two of them stood there as if they had merged with the world. Their every move was in accordance with the fate of the world. From today onwards, the Shenzhou Lord, she will be the Lord of the Eastern Territory. Dao Master Tai Xian will be the Lord of the Eastern Territory and will be in charge of all sections. Empress Wushuang will be the Empress of the Western Territory. Guzhen will be in charge of the Southern Territory, and the Heavenly Territory will be the sacred religion of the Southern Territory. Juyou of the Northern Territory will be the Emperor and will be the Emperor of Juyou. Ling Zhao's voice was leisurely and vast, spreading across the 4 territories. The people on the mountain peak also knelt on the ground and cheered. As soon as he finished speaking, Ling Xiao turned around and walked into the hall. Yi Qingchan, Phoenix Rouge, Lin Meng, Ling Tian, Liang Yi, Chun Qingshan, and the others followed closely behind and disappeared. Among the crowd, Qin Wushuang's eyes were calm as he watched that figure in black gradually disappear at the end of the palace. Only, he felt a strange sense of loss inwardly. She had used the Blood Soul sacrificial ghost cannon in the Battle of Deicide. Although she did not die, she no longer had the opportunity to break through. Wushuang, you come too. But, just when that figure was about to disappear, he suddenly stopped and turned to look at Qin Wushuang. Hearing this, the Empress of the West Border's face immediately surged with a myriad of emotions. Yes, young master. In the main hall of the Divine Palace, Ling Xiao sat alone in the hall, looking at the dozens of figures standing on both sides of the hall below. Most of those standing in the hall were the true heaven's mandate of the Shenzhou continent. After merging with the universe dragon spirit, Ling Xiao learned that this world was originally an ancestral planet derived from the beginning of the primordial era. It contained the purest source of Tao. It was only later that the immortal race unified and sealed off the 100,000 star regions. The Shenzhou continent had no experts to guard it, so it gradually became a prison. This also explained why so many people of the mandate of the heavens had been born in this small lower realm. Shi-Er, have you really decided? Ling Xiao first glanced at Shi-Er, his eyes seeming to be somewhat pensive. Given this girl's current cultivation and fortune, she could be said to be on par with Yi Qingchan. But as soon as she woke up, she made a decision that surprised Ling Xiao. She wanted to protect this world as the successor of the dragon. Yes, big brother, I've already merged with the dragon spirit and have the power to control the will of this world. I will never allow anyone to trample on the living beings of this world. Shi-Er's eyes were cold as she glanced at Yi Qingchan. The latter frowned slightly and was about to speak when she heard Ling Zhao's deep voice. That's good. With you and father in charge of the Shenzhou continent, I could be more at ease. What happened here would be known by the immortal race sooner or later. After all, the ancestral alligator had not fallen, and who knew where it was now? And with Ling Tianlin hiding in the dark and Sheer in charge of the heavenly Tao, it would be difficult for anyone to walk out of this world unless it was a supreme being of the world. Master, I also plan to stay in this world. Liang Yi's expression was solemn. In the end, he sighed softly, walked to the front of the hall, and bowed to Ling Xiao. Master, please take back this reincarnation mark. Why? Ling Xiao frowned slightly. Although in this last battle, he had indeed seen the true danger of the immortal path. But he still had complete trust in Liang, Yi, and Xionghuan. Master, my reincarnation road is a curse of the heavenly Tao. Unless one day you can control the 9 heavens, there is no way to break this curse. With all the lords in the upper world planning, I am at ease. According to my guess, this reincarnation mark is not complete. If Master can find the rest of the marks, perhaps you can find the reincarnation divine palace, or even the reincarnation abyss. With that, Liang Yi respectfully returned the reincarnation mark to Ling Xiao, turned, and retreated to the side. What about you? Who doesn't want to go to the upper world? Ling Xiao nodded indifferently. Liang Yi was right. With his cultivation and battle strength, it was meaningless whether he could step out of this world or not. 100 years of reincarnation was endless. Even if he went to the Azure world, how much could he cultivate in the end? I will not follow you either. Ming Yuan's voice was cold. She still could not convince herself to love a demon without reservation. Even if she was deeply in love and yearned for it, she could not do it. She could not do it at all. Are you sure? Ling Xiao frowned slightly, demonic patterns flashing in his eyes. He had not left the Shenzhou continent, so Meng Yuan naturally could not cause any trouble. But once he left this place, this woman of destiny would not submit to him. It was inevitable that there would be unforeseen events. Ling Xiao still had 2 luck plundering talismans on him. If she really did not know what was good for her, then follow me. Just as coldness flowed in Ling Xiao's eyes, a gentle voice suddenly came from outside the hall. Hearing this voice, the indifference in Ming Yuan's eyes almost instantly collapsed. Her eyes turned red, and she bit her red lips with her silver teeth, clearly trying hard to hold back her tears. She had felt the killing intent in Ling Xiao's eyes for a moment just now. This bastard is still so domineering. Why can you be so gentle to her, but always so fierce to me? The Xin Yuan clan is the Azure Emperor clan. Follow me and cultivate well. The moon of Xin Yuan already knew about Ming Yuan's background. In the end, this holy maiden was also a pitiful person. Even now, she did not know whether she was born of Yi Luo Yun or by Zhuro. But all in all, she had once become enemies with her father for Ling Xiao. The moon of Xin Yuan glared fiercely at Ling Xiao, the meaning in her eyes self-evident. The moon of Xin Yuan had never interfered with Ling Xiao's cultivation partner. But based on her understanding of Ling Tianlin, when he agreed to the marriage between Ling Xiao and the Holy Maiden of the Tao Palace, it was most likely because he had seen through Nian Xingyan. Otherwise, with the pride of this clan, there was no way they would allow Ling Xiao to marry an ordinary woman in a lower world. Of course, the moon of Xin Yuan did not care about her background. What she valued was the girl's character and loyalty to her son. This Meng Yuan was clearly interested in Ling Xiao. She was just stubborn, but that stupid son of hers was unreasonable. Auntie Min's jade-like hands rubbed the corner of her clothes as tears fell from her eyes. She turned around and bowed to the moon of Xin Yuan. Thank you, Auntie. She no longer had any relatives in the Shenzhou, let alone a clan. In the past, she still had the noble wish of slaying demons and bringing peace to the world. Now that the sacred sect had been destroyed and the world was united, Meng Yuan suddenly felt that she did not belong in this world. Silly child, what are you thanking me for? We are family. The moon of Xin Yuan smiled kindly, without the usual majesty. She reached out and stroked Ming Yuan's hair, making the girl's heart tremble and feel a warm sense of belonging. Chapter 908. Mother. Ling Xiao smiled helplessly. However, the moon of Xin Yuan glared at him and did not say anything else. He understood that although the moon of Xuan Yuan's action seemed to be for Meng Yuan, it was also to solve a big problem for him. With his mother's guidance, Meng Yuan would not be able to escape from Ling Zhao's palm. All of you should work hard too. You've been together every day. Other than fighting and killing, shouldn't you be busy with serious matters? If anyone can give birth to my son's first child, the Xin Yuan clan will make him the emperor. The moon of Xin Yuan glanced at Phoenix Rouge, Lin Meng, and Han Qingxiu. Hearing this, all the girls' faces turned red and they lowered their heads. Only Bai Zhishi pinched the corner of her clothes and looked at Ling Xiao with anticipation. At the same time, she muttered, I want to do some serious things, but young master won't give me the chance. At this time, Ling Xiao's gaze fell on Han Qingxiu. He saw that the destined girl's eyes had turned pink like Bai Zhishi and Meng Yuan. However, inexplicably, when combined with Han Qingxiu's cold and arrogant temperament, it showed a unique charm. Originally, Ling Xiao planned to merge with this spiritual pill when he fought against the Divine Lord and try to break through the last step. He did not expect that under the Divine Mountain, there was a supreme fortune to break through the shackles of heaven and earth. The destined girl was accompanied by luck. This way, she could be considered to have escaped a disaster. Oh, if Meng Yuan was really Bai Jiro's daughter, according to seniority, she should call Bai Zhishi Aunt. Wushuang, if you want, you can also follow me to the upper world. Although Qin Wushuang did not have luck, the technique she practiced was a classic of the Ghost Clan in the upper world. According to Yi Qingshan, in this azure world, the spiritual treasures were divided into Dao weapons, immortal weapons, emperor weapons, holy weapons, and supreme weapons. The techniques were mysterious technique, immortal technique, divine skill, classic, and legendary codex. It was rumored that there was a spirit treasure in the Realm Lord Palace. It was a supreme weapon. Back then, the Azure Firmament World Lord had unified thousands of star fields and suppressed billions of races in the Azure Firmament World, relying on this immortal treasure. The division of realms in the upper realm was more or less the same as what Ling Xiao knew. Above the God Emperor realm, there was the threshold of the Origin realm. Beyond the God Emperor realm, but not the Exalted realm. The Exalted realm was the symbol of an expert. They could control the power of heaven and earth and suppress the sun, moon, mountains, and rivers. Above there were the Saint realm, Paragon realm, and Immortal realm. The Sovereign realm was further divided into Earthly Sovereign, Heavenly Sovereign, and Emperor realm. In short, the realms in the Azure world could be roughly divided into Emperor God, Supreme Realm, Saint Realm, Earthly Sovereign, Heavenly Sovereign, Great Emperor, and Immortal. Without the Immortal realm, the Great Emperor was already the pinnacle of the human world. In a true sense, he was the sole ruler of heaven and earth. Young master, there's no need. I prefer to protect your territory, as long as you remember that I'm here in the Shenzhou continent. Qin Wushuang smiled brightly without the slightest trace of sadness. However, her eyes, which were originally tired of the mortal world, were more or less filled with desolation. In just a short year, Ling Zhao's strength had completely exceeded her understanding. In the end, she was not worthy of this true dragon who soared in the 9 heavens. Regardless of whether he was a demon or an immortal, he was not someone immortal like her could compare to. In fact, even if she could follow in his footsteps, she would not give up so easily. Unfortunately, she could not even see his backbone. In the end, Qin Wushuang was a proud woman. As the empress of a dynasty, she shouldered the revenge of her country. At the age of 16, she had stirred up the rise and fall of the entire Qin dynasty. It was not that she could not see that he was more outstanding than her. She just could not bear to see him falling further and further behind until they were parallel worlds. In the end, the wind of spring could not blow the rain of summer. The stars in the night sky could not illuminate the sea of dawn. Qin Wushuang envied Yi Qingshan, Bai Zhishi, Hua, and the others. At the very least, they had the opportunity and the right to stand beside the young master. Since that day, there was no more dragon master in the Qin dynasty. She had also lost her faith. She stood on the mottled city wall of the Xianyang city and tried hard to open her hands. However, she could no longer embrace the light. She watched that figure walking in the sky, getting further and further away, until he disappeared. However, she did not have the slightest trace of nostalgia. Qin Wushuang understood that in the end, she was just a passing scene. Even if she was magnificent, she was the only one who was moved. I hate you the most. You did not even want to look back after walking for so long. I love you the most. Even if I knew that I would die, I would not regret or complain. After today, I will be with the summer cicada, the winter thunder, and the June. Wushuang is here. I wish that you will soar 90,000 miles and not be blocked by immortals or demons. As soon as she finished speaking, Qin Wushuang turned around resolutely and walked down the mountain. The mountain wind rose from all directions, and the bright sun did not shine. Only the red clothes floating in the mountain touched someone's heart and made someone's eye socket sour. Suddenly, the entire main hall fell into a dead silence. Even though Feng Rugu was a transmigrator, her eyes were filled with tears at this moment. It turned out that for many people, being able to stay in the main hall was an extravagant hope. Therefore, I cherish it and never dare to be careless. Nine Nether, what about you? Ling Xiao sighed lightly, looking somewhat tired. Young master, you can go in peace. In the holy state, there will be a statue of you. Nine Nether's bright eyes were not as resolute as Qin Wushuang's. From the beginning to the end, she only had greed in her heart. However, she did not receive any response from her young master. Therefore, she did not hate him. She only hoped that Ling Xiao could reach the top of the world and achieve immortality. That was all she hoped for. All right, you can return to your clans to deal with your own affairs. 7 days later, we will meet at the holy mountain and ascend to the upper world with me. Ling Xiao waved his hand. Ling Qinchan, you two stay. Bai Ling crossed her arms and glared fiercely at Bai Ling originally. Although she also hated Phoenix Rouge and the others, she did not feel threatened. However, this Bai Ling who came out of nowhere was somewhat similar to her type. What's so fun about a human lowly? I could transform. However, on second thought, a sly smile appeared on Bai Jishi's face. Then, she ran over to the moon of Xianyuan and squeezed Mengyuan out of the way. She giggled. Hee, Auntie, I'm Jishi. You must be very tired. Come, Annie, I'll give you a massage. Didn't young master just say to deal with the affairs of our clans? Serving my future mother-in-law is also considered a family affair, right? When everyone left the main hall, Ling Zhao's hand flashed with a ray of spiritual light, and he threw it at Bai Ling. This is a heavenly wheel elixir C. Ling you can merge with it and cultivate the immortal path again. Heavenly wheel elixir C. Bai Ling's beautiful eyes narrowed, and a smile appeared on her face. Thank you, big brother. No need. From now on, you just need to focus on cultivating in your realm. You don't have to worry about the upper world for now. Ling Xiao waved his hand and put Bai Ling into his realm. Then, he looked at Yi Qingshan. Their eyes met, and no words were spoken. Yi Qingshan walked lightly, and her green robe slipped off her body. She threw herself into Ling Zhao's arms. Young master, Qingshan, I missed you so much. Ling Zhao's lips curled into a smile. He reached out and stroked Yi Qingshan's hair. The main hall was suddenly filled with the feeling of spring, and the scenery was boundless. Chapter 909. Qingshan, this Xingzhou is your Foliace's domain. You should have a way to return to the Azure world, right? In the main hall, Ling Xiao hugged Yi Qingshan as he reclined on a golden chair. Don't worry, sir. This ancient token is the key to opening the domain barrier. Counting the time limit for me to be suppressed in this world is up. But the Foliace hasn't sent anyone to replace me. It seems that my cousin has been doing well in the Foliace all these years. Yi Qingshan's pretty face was flushed, but her eyes flashed with a hint of coldness. You still remember Xiao Bo, right? Ling Zhao's lips suddenly curled into a playful smile, but Yi Qingshan turned her head and bit his shoulder. You still dare to talk about him? Sir, why did you let this bastard out? If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have been framed. Yesterday, I saw him on the Divine Mountain, and wanted to kill him on the spot, but he acted all high and mighty, saying that he's now your first guard. Don't worry, I'll make the Foliaceae pay back your grudge 100-fold. I'll also make those who framed you pay the price. Ling Xiao smiled faintly. Since Yi Qingchuan had ascended to the upper realm, the Foliaceae would definitely send someone to the lower realm again. But this time, Ling Xiao planned to appoint someone for them. Qingchuan, no matter how deep the conflict between you and the Foliaceae is, I need you to take charge of the Foliaceae in the upper realm. At the very least, you must have a sufficient position in the Foliaceae. Ling Xiao's expression was calm, but in his heart, he was already thinking about how to take the azure sky world into his hands. This domain was vast and endless, and the master of this domain was a member of the Immortals. Moreover, the peak of the Shengzhou was only at the venerable stage, and there was only one person. In the azure world, there were many strong people, and ancient clans and immortal sects were everywhere. Although the Immortals had suppressed tens of thousands of galaxies, no one knew if there were any characters from 10,000 or even 100,000 years ago among these ancient sects and clans. None of these people were any less scheming than Yi Luoyan. This was the true beginning of the immortal path. However, the Divine Master's sacred body, which was exposed when he fell, made Ling Xiao feel slightly uneasy. 3 generations? Did the Divine Master have one lifetime, or 3 lifetimes combined? If it was only one life, then didn't that mean that the other 2 lives were still in the 9 heavens? The devil lives a lifetime? As for the remaining 2 lives, Azure, Firmament World, Deity Battle Region, there was a towering mountain at the center of the realm. The mountain was covered in layers of golden light and mist, and one could vaguely see magnificent ancient palaces standing among them. From time to time, the roars of great demons could be heard in the void. However, there was no ferocity in the roars. Instead, there was a hint of flattery. There were divine trees growing in the shade of the mountain and immortal flowers blooming on the mountain path. The spirit waterfall was dense, and the Tao runes were leisurely. Even a random rock in the mountain had layers of immortal intent lingering around it. This was where the Taigu Ling people lived. It was also one of the 2 places in the entire Azure Firmament world that one could not go to without being summoned. At this moment, on the mountain peak, there were several elders in white standing with their hands behind their backs. At the head of the group was an elder with white hair. His eyes were as deep as the abyss, which was completely different from the Tao runes around him. News from Tianlin. Master is about to ascend to the upper world. Yes, he's finally here. The Ling people don't have to endure anymore. Have you found out about the 8 bell tolls that day? Not yet, but the aura seems to have come from the Immortal Phoenix Ancient Dynasty. Immortal Phoenix Ancient Dynasty? I don't remember there being any remains or treasures of the Sky Demon there. Yes, this is strange, but it's also an opportunity for Master. Although the ancestral dragon, Saint Soul, can hide the aura of the Sky Demon, the immortal demon Ancient Bell can detect karma and reincarnation. Now that the entire Azure Firmament world knows about the birth of the Sky Demon, Master won't attract attention in the upper world. That's right. Keep an eye on the teleportation formation in the Foliaceae. Once there's any movement, send someone to slaughter a few ancient sects to attract their attention. Yes, clan leader. Gu Chao Ci, it's not up to you to make the decision this time. The 3rd ancestor is about to come out of seclusion. This time, he will personally send you to the Divine Spirit Celestial Dynasty. If you don't want to, Gu Chao Ci, your cultivation, in the Golden Palace of the Immortal Phoenix Ancient Dynasty. A middle-aged man in a golden robe frowned as he looked at the woman in a red emperor's robe in front of him. There was a hint of fear in his eyes. I said, I'm not marrying. Gu Chao Ci's tone was clear, but her face was strangely pale. It's not up to you this time. The middle-aged man in the golden robe suddenly looked downcast. Chaozi, don't blame me for being ruthless. Even if you're peerless, the ancestors of our bloodline have already died. If it weren't for your heaven-defying talent, I'm afraid they would have already kicked you off the throne. This time, you failed at the last step. You broke your promise first. Even if I wanted to help you, I can't. In the end, you're just afraid of losing your dignity in the Gu clan. Gu Chaoxiai's expression didn't change. It was as cold as ever. But at this moment, a gentle and handsome face suddenly appeared in her heart. Compared to the Gu clan and the immortal Phoenix ancient dynasty, she was the empress of the immortal Phoenix ancient dynasty. The only time she felt warmth in her life was when she was with a demon. Or rather, it was only when she was beside him that Gu Chaoxiai understood the meaning of life. No, he's the sky demon. He's cruel and heartless. How can I trust him so easily? Gu Chaoxiai, could it be that you've forgotten what despicable methods he used to humiliate you back then? But, Chaozi, your mother left when you were young. I raised you single-handedly. Your talent is the hope of our bloodline, but it's also a danger to our bloodline. Once you can crush the entire Gu clan, the immortal Phoenix ancient dynasty will still be your imperial dynasty. But if you don't, they will do everything they can to take it back. The golden-robed middle-aged man sighed softly. The crown prince of the Holy Spirit dynasty has been in love with you for more than 100 or 200 years. Previously, when you were about to achieve great success in the way of immortality, the Gu clan didn't dare to rush you. But now the time has come. If you delay any longer, I'm afraid not only you, but even your father will be punished by the clan. I won't marry him. If the Gu clan really forces me, then I will leave the immortal Phoenix ancient dynasty and return the family name to them. Gu Chaoxiai was still unmoved. How could she not know that she had already been abandoned by the Gu clan? Back then, her bloodline was the strongest in the Gu clan. But an unexpected storm happened. The ancestor died unexpectedly, and the Gu clan fell into chaos. If she hadn't comprehended the great Tao of chaos, her position as the emperor of the celestial dynasty would have been taken away by someone else. Originally, Gu Chaoxiai had been through 9 lifetimes. As long as she could complete the law of Tao, no one in the Azure world would be her match. But in the end, her Tao heart was covered in dust. She failed at the last step. It was her fate. You, Gu Chaoxiai, do you really want to force me to attack you? The third ancestor has ordered that the day he comes out of seclusion is the day he will send you to the Holy Spirit celestial dynasty. This time, you have to marry him whether you want to or not. After saying that, the golden-robed, middle-aged man didn't hesitate at all. He suddenly reached out his hand and sealed Gu Chaoxiai's cultivation, as well as the entire palace. But somehow, he felt that Gu Chaoxiai's cultivation seemed to have fallen. I won't marry him even if I die. The third ancestor said that even if you die, you will die in the Holy Spirit celestial dynasty. Chapter 9:10. Shengzhou Divine Mountain. 7 days passed in the blink of an eye. Countless figures stood quietly at the peak of the Divine Mountain, gazing into the distance. Ling Xiao, dressed in black, stood with his hands clasped behind his back. Beside him, Yi Qingchuan stood half a step behind him. She looked gentle, and the immortal token in her hand shone brightly. Ling Tian, Ning, and the others were willing to follow Ling Xiao to the Azure world. They had already been taken into the latter's domain. Just as the two of them were about to step onto the immortal ascension platform that led to the Azure world, Ling Xiao suddenly turned his head and looked at the graceful figure in golden robes in front of the crowd. Brother. Xi'er's bright eyes narrowed. She was also reluctant to part with him. She knew that Ling Xiao would probably never turn back. Even if she merged with the ancestral dragon's saint soul, her cultivation would definitely fall behind him in this desolate lower world until it was impossible for her to stand shoulder to shoulder with him. Even those who followed the young master would eventually grow to a height that she could only look up to. It wasn't that she didn't want to follow Ling Xiao to see the vastness of the 9 heavens, but the ancestral dragons will now bound her, so she had no choice but to stay in this world and rebuild order. Perhaps one day, she would fulfill her ancestors' wish and dare to devote her life to one person. Soon, a new guardian will descend on the Shengzhou. I've already informed Father to come and help you. Remember, no matter who comes, kill them without mercy. Ling Xiao said calmly with a gentle expression, but the killing intent in his words made Shi Er's face darken. She nodded silently. Brother, don't worry. I understand. After killing her, seal this teleportation array. With that, Ling Xiao no longer hesitated. He held Yi Qingchan's hand and stepped onto the ancient altar. The world suddenly lit up with dazzling, immortal radiance. Endless rays of light covered the sky. Two figures rose into the sky like heaven-defying stars, illuminating the firmament. At this moment, the entire Shenzhou fell into shock. Countless experts walked out of the ancient grounds of their sects and raised their heads to look into the distance. When they saw the star finally break through the sky and vanish, their eyes flickered with a wisp of admiration and envy. It had been hundreds of years since anyone from the Shenzhou continent had ascended to the upper world. The spiritual pressure that had spread out from the void was enough to intimidate the 10,000 races of the Shenzhou continent. It was obvious that someone had broken the shackles of the world and left the Shenzhou continent. On the city wall of Profound Sun, there was a beautiful figure in red holding a jade pot. She leaned against the railing and looked into the distance, gently sipping wine. However, there was no trace of sadness on her face. Instead, there was a slight smile on her lips. He left. He's finally gone, and he won't mess with my Dao heart anymore. I'll just assume he's dead. He's dead. He's dead. Qin Wushuang raised his head and poured that pot of strong liquor into his throat. His eyes flashed as he laughed with a hoarse voice. However, tears finally fell from the corners of his eyes. Anyway, you won't be able to see it. Whether you're drunk or awake, you won't be able to see it. But didn't he die once? Suddenly, the drunkenness on Qin Wushuang's face disappeared and confusion appeared in his eyes. Northern border, 9 Nether Mountain Peak. 9 Nether had her hands behind her back as she looked at the gradually dissipating celestial radiance. In the end, she had gotten what she wanted and avenged the Ming Feng clan, but she had lost the respect of waiting for her. After he left, the mountains and rivers remained the same, but her heart was empty. Pass down my order. From today onwards, everything in the northern border will be managed by Elder Ghost Toad. I'm going into seclusion. I won't come out until I'm dead. Haha, what's the difference between life and death? Eastern border, myriad Dao demon sect. With the support of the Ling people, the myriad Dao demon sect was now the most prosperous sect in the eastern border. However, recently, myriad Dao demon sect had suddenly gone into seclusion and passed the position of sect master to his disciple, Fu Yinyao. This surprised many ancient sect masters. Of course, only those who knew about the relationship between Fu Yinyao and Ling Xiao understood myriad Dao demon sect's intention. Although the current leader of the Shenzhou continent was God Shi, the ones who truly controlled the fate of the Shenzhou continent were the Ling people. I didn't expect young master to ascend to the upper world in the blink of an eye. At the peak of the Demon Mountain, Xiao Tu wore a gray robe and looked lonely. When they parted on the Divine Mountain, young master had given him a soul technique and countless spirit treasures. Now, with his spirit techniques, Xiao Tu was the most dazzling genius in the eastern border. However, only he knew that without young master, he wouldn't be where he was today. Yes, in the blink of an eye, Fu Yinyao's pretty face was calm. She was no longer the little senior sister who followed Ling Xiao. She had the grace of a sect master. It's funny that I'm still dreaming. With that, Fu Yinyao shook her head and smiled bitterly. She turned and walked down the mountain. However, at this moment, her steps seemed lonely. Even with the mountains as her companion, it was difficult to hide her loneliness. Ling people, you will regret this sooner or later. The Celestials will never let you go. In the Ling people's territory, Ling Tianlin was wearing a white robe. He looked at a green jade bead in his hand. There seemed to be vast soul power inside, which turned into a ferocious face. Celestials? Ling Tianlin smiled faintly. The world will be divided after a long time. He had a feeling that Xiao Er's departure would cause chaos in the 9 heavens. In a void thousands of miles away, Ling Xiao and Yi Qingchuan walked side by side. Endless Taoist rhymes flowed in front of them. The order of space fluctuated. Meanwhile, the Yi clan's ancient medallion blossomed with a clear radiance and floated above their heads, guiding them forward so that they wouldn't get lost in the chaotic streams of space. Qingchuan, I will enter the Glaze ancient pagoda later. You hide from the foliaceae first. Ling Zhao's expression was calm. However, Yi Qingchuan suddenly frowned and looked at him with a pleading expression. Young master, are you going to leave me alone in the foliaceae? It wasn't easy for me to return to your side. We don't know the situation in the Azure world now. Once my sky demon identity is exposed, I will become the enemy of the entire world. It's too dangerous for you to follow me now. Ling Xiao shook his head and sighed softly. Suddenly, the image of an arrogant and peerlessly beautiful woman in white appeared in his mind. Calculating the time, it had been 3 years since Nian Qingyun returned to the upper world. I wonder if she still remembers me now? Oh. Yi Qingchuan lowered her head, looking a little lonely. Qingchuan, this time, our enemy isn't just one person or a force. It's the entire immortal race. Don't worry, young master. As long as I return to the foliaceae, I will definitely take back the position of young master. Yi Qingchuan nodded slightly. She knew Ling Zhao's personality. Only by being a useful person to him would his love last forever. Ling Xiao sighed with a cold expression. The Azure world was 10,000 times more dangerous than Shengzhou. Moreover, Ling Xiao still didn't know what the Taigu Ling people's attitude would be. However, according to Ling Tianlin's temperament, since he didn't say too much, he was probably confident. In other words, once Ling Xiao went to the upper world, the ancient race would become his new support. However, right when Ling Xiao was pondering in his heart, an expanse of darkness suddenly enveloped over from the space before him. It was like the enormous mouth of an abyss that covered the world, layer upon layer, and it was boundless. It instantly swallowed the glow of the Tao, order, and spatial traces. Moreover, even with Ling Zhao's spirit perception, he couldn't react in time. He was directly enveloped by the endless darkness. He only felt a strange force invading his body and forcibly pulling him into another space. What's going on? Ling Xiao held Yi Qingchuan tightly. A look of panic flashed across the latter's face. She was clearly surprised by the scene before her. I don't know either, young master. We seem to have been stopped. Chapter 9:11. Did someone stop us? Ling Xiao frowned. Tao laws circulated around him, and his eyes were cold. I'm the villain, but you don't have to play with me like this, do you? The child of destiny ascended to the upper realm. Everything would be smooth sailing, and he would ascend to the western paradise. Why did something happen when I ascended to the upper world? That's not right. Usually, there would be treasures in such a strange space. Could it be that one of them triggered a hidden opportunity? Master, be careful. Buzz. When the darkness in front of them gradually faded away, they saw a strange scarlet world. Heaven and earth were the same color, and it made them feel depressed. Ling Xiao narrowed his eyes. With the Tao laws of time that he had comprehended after fusing with the dragon's soul, he could clearly feel that the flow of time in this world was extremely slow. However, the spirit chi of heaven and earth was so thin that it made one feel hopeless. Could it be a space of some treasure? With that thought, Ling Zhao's ninth stage venerable realm soul consciousness instantly spread out and covered thousands of miles. In the next moment, his eyes narrowed. He grabbed Yi Qingchuan's hand and pulled her behind him. At the same time, a few extremely terrifying auras suddenly soared into the sky from all directions, and they flashed towards Ling Xiao and the young man. Of course, Ling Xiao wouldn't dare to hesitate at all if he hadn't sensed the realm. He would have retreated into it. Those 4 auras were obviously more powerful than him by more than one stage. But this place was strange. He had to see the living beings in this world to understand where he was. Buzz! There was a dazzling light at the end of the sky. In just a few breaths, four figures surrounded by immortal auras descended from the sky. There were 3 men and 1 woman. One of them was a scrawny middle-aged man in tattered clothes. One of them was a burly man with a demonic aura. One of them was an old man with white hair and a white beard, and the last woman was beautiful. Her hair was tied up in a bun, and she was wearing a green dress that emitted immortal light. Moreover, what was even more surprising was that although these 4 people didn't have any luck, their Taoist rhymes were naturally formed, and they had evolved into yin and yang. Their cultivations had all entered the saint realm, and they were all at the 3rd or 4th stage of the saint realm. Saint realm expert. Yi Qingqian's beautiful eyes narrowed slightly, and she also looked a little nervous. Of course, if she had not been suppressed by the foliaceae and ended up in the wilderness of the Shenzhou continent, her cultivation would have already reached this stage. But now, she was only a divine king. Not to mention fighting against a saint stage expert. Just a glance from the 4 of them would be enough to destroy her body and soul. Although Ling Xiao had relied on the true dragon saint soul to enter the honorable realm, it would be difficult for him to escape death if he faced 4 saint realm experts at the same time. Haha, it's been 500 years. Finally, someone has come. What made Ling Xiao and Bai Yunfei feel strange was that when the 4 figures descended from the sky, there wasn't the slightest bit of hostility or surprise on their faces. Instead, they revealed a kind of bone-chilling joy. Everyone, demonic intent flowed in Ling Xiao's eyes as his gaze swept across the 4 people. May I ask where this place is? At this moment, he vaguely felt that the 4 of them were most likely trapped here as well. Although there was no hostility in their eyes, there was no kindness in them either. Where's this place? That's a good question. If we knew where this place was, how could we have been trapped here for tens of thousands of years? The white-haired old man among them sneered and sized up Yi Qingqian. TSKSK, what a pity. What a pity. Ling Xiao frowned slightly. Under his robe, his 2 arms gradually turned pitch black. With his current strength, he might be able to kill a saint realm expert if he attacked with all his strength. Moreover, the 4 people in front of him were clearly not on good terms with each other and were quite wary of each other. More importantly, Ling Xiao could clearly feel that 2 auras in the domain had broken through the shackles. One of them seemed to have already surpassed the saint realm. It was obvious that after leaving the Shenzhou continent and escaping the suppression of the heavenly Tao, someone's strength had recovered. Kid, you can't be thinking of sparring with me, right? The white-haired old man's expression turned serious, and he suddenly laughed heartily. Ha ha ha. Oh, look. Don't they look like us when we first entered this world? All right, you better shut up. The next natural disaster will be in 3 days. Old man Su, you should thank them. Otherwise, the one who died this time would be you. The burly middle-aged man with a demonic aura suddenly opened his mouth and interrupted the old man's laughter. Kid, which world did you ascend from? Which world did we ascend from? Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows and seemed to understand something. So you were all trapped here when you ascended to the Azure world? Humph, you're quick to react. That's right, this damn place is a place one must pass to ascend to the Azure world from a lower world. We all came from different domains, and we're all trapped here. The sloppy middle-aged man snorted coldly, his expression extremely sinister. To be able to ascend to the Azure world from a lower world, it was obvious that the 4 of them were extremely talented. Of course, if it wasn't for the fact that the spiritual energy here was too thin, they would have already stepped into a higher level in these tens of thousands of years. As expected, those without luck can't escape death no matter where they go. Ling Xiao smiled faintly, then asked in a low voice, I wonder what you mean by natural disaster. Every 100 years, a strange fluctuation will sweep through this damn place. The person with the lowest cultivation will directly explode, and his body and soul will be destroyed. No matter what realm you are in, this kind of power can't be resisted. The gray-clothed woman who hadn't opened her mouth all this time suddenly looked at Yi Qingqian. No matter how talented you are in this place, as long as your cultivation is low, the one who dies is you. There's no reason at all. In 3 days, the next natural disaster will come. I see. Ling Xiao and Yi Qingchuan looked at each other and finally understood the meaning of the four people's expressions. Perhaps, in their eyes, Ling Xiao and Yi Qingchuan were equivalent to an extra 200 years of lifespan that came out of nowhere. Originally, there were many people in this damned place. Unfortunately, no one has ascended in a long time. The gray-clothed woman shook her head. Now, you can only hope that in these 3 days, someone else will ascend. Have you never thought of leaving this place? Ling Zhao's voice trailed off, and the four people's faces turned bitter. In these 10,000 years, we've walked to every corner of this damned place. Unfortunately, other than this red land, there's nothing else. Sometimes we even suspect that the color of this place is dyed red by the blood of countless living beings. It's useless. Everything is useless. But no one wants to die. We can only cultivate with all our might. In the end, the four of them looked at Ling Xiao and Yi Qingchuan deeply and walked in 4 different directions. Master, Yi Qingchuan frowned, and her beautiful eyes were full of self-blame. Master, it's all my fault. It's okay. This may be our chance. Ling Xiao smiled warmly and looked into the distance. If he hadn't comprehended the rules of time and perfected it through the system's reward, he wouldn't have noticed the strangeness of this space. Here, the flow of time was 100 times slower than in his domain. In other words, 100 days here was probably only a day in the outside world. Therefore, he only needed to find the source of this time order, and he would be able to find a way out. It wasn't that Ling Xiao hadn't tried the boundary breaker talisman. However, he realized that this space didn't seem to be an array or boundary. The boundary breaker talisman couldn't exert any power. However, since he couldn't leave, Ling Xiao could summon the others and have them cultivate here. As for the natural disaster, 3 days later, Ling Xiao planned to give the old man a big surprise. Chapter 9:12. Buzz. It was not until the 4 figures disappeared that Ling Xiao appeared in the realm, holding Yi Qingchuan's hand. It was obvious that although this strange space limited their range of movement, it did not limit their methods. Just now, the white-haired old man glanced at Yi Qingchuan, which made Ling Xiao want to kill him. If it were not for the fact that this place only had natural disasters once every 100 years, he would have attacked Ling Xiao and taken Yi Qingchuan for himself. His cultivation level was obviously the lowest among the 4, so Ling Xiao guessed that he would die in 3 days. Xiao, in the heavenly palace, the moon of Xianyuan looked up at the 2 figures descending from the sky. Beside her, Bai Zhishi, Phoenix Rouge, Lin Ming, Meng Yuan, and the other girls were in the center, looking like a happy mother. We're here. At this moment, the moon of Xianyuan had a complicated look in her eyes. She suspected that the Ling people and some people in the Xianyuan clan must have planned this and joined forces with that bastard Ling Tianlin to deceive her. But in the end, she was still the Xianyuan princess, and the most noble bloodline of the human sovereign Xianyuan flowed in her veins. Moreover, now that she knew the Ling people's plan, if this clan could not kill her, they would have to be wary of her. Therefore, it was not an exaggeration to say that this time, when she returned to the Azure world, she had a slim chance of survival. However, Ling Tianlin left an ancient order that could restrict the Ling people. If the Ling people dared to attack her or Ling Xiao, she would make them understand what it meant to be beyond redemption. In the end, in the Azure world, there were many sects and ancient clans. Anyone who could become a successor or a clan leader was a scheming person. The path to immortality was vast, and strength was the capital to crush all enemies. However, in order to ensure the prosperity of their clan, they either had to have an exceedingly high cultivation or they had to be scheming enough. No, there was an accident. Ling Xiao shook his head and smiled, but there was no worry in his eyes. Accident? Xiao, what's wrong? Moon of Xianyuan frowned and turned to look at Yi Qingchuan. After all, ever since the Moon of Xianyuan found out about Yi Qingchuan's reincarnation, he had some misgivings. Fully ACE belonged to the Qing Tsung race and were also vassals of the immortal race. Now, Ling Zhao's secret was probably already known by this person from the Foliaceae. Once she returned to the upper realm and had some thoughts that she shouldn't have, Ling Xiao would be doomed eternally. In the Shangzhou, the strongest were only at the exalted realm. Even with the shackles of the heavenly Tao, if she wanted to leave with Ling Xiao, a mere divine master would not be able to stop her. However, Qin Song was different. This was a true tiger's den. With her bloodline talent, if she did not have the support of the Xianyuan clan, she would not be able to protect Ling Xiao. In the opinion of the moon of Xianyuan, such a scourge should be killed. Only in this way could it be called foolproof. Mother, your cultivation. Ling Xiao smiled bitterly and took the initiative to stand in front of Yi Qin Chan, blocking the power of the moon of Xianyuan. He could naturally guess his mother's misgivings, but the system's authentication would never be wrong. However, he could not explain this matter. Third stage saint. The moon of Xianyuan glared fiercely at Ling Xiao. What happened? It seems like we're trapped. Trapped? Even the boundary-breaking talisman can't get out? Mother, this space is a little strange. It doesn't seem to be a formation boundary, but more like a spiritual treasure space. Ling Xiao looked at a corner of the realm, where an extremely terrifying aura was awakening. Ghost Shadow, then what should we do? Xiao? Could it be that someone discovered your whereabouts? The moon of Xianyuan stood up with a serious expression. Ling Zhao's identity was really special, and she was completely unaware of the current situation in the Azure world. The fear of facing the unknown made her feel slightly uneasy. It shouldn't be. Mother, you don't have to worry. I'll be careful. With that, Ling Xiao gave Yi Qin-chan a look and rushed toward where Ghost Shadow was. Compared to the moon of Xianyuan, Ghost Shadow, as an old subordinate of the Sky Demon, undoubtedly had a deeper understanding of this world. Moreover, Ling Xiao had to figure out his true cultivation before he could be confident in facing the four saints. Greetings, Lord. When Ling Zhao's figure descended from the sky, Ghost Shadow and Xionghuan immediately stood up and bowed deeply to Ling Xiao. At this time, there was a demonic aura surging around the two of them. However, compared to Ghost Shadow, Xionghuan's current realm was obviously lower by more than one level. Ghost Shadow, what realm are you in now? Lord, an 8th grade Earth Sovereign. Ghost Shadow's voice was hoarse, and there was a mysterious spatial fluctuation around him. It was like a black hole in the void, swallowing all the spiritual energy within 100 miles. An Earth Sovereign? Ling Zhao's lips curled into a smile. It seemed that the remaining 3 saints would not be able to escape from his hands. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. At this moment, on a barren mountain in that strange space, an extremely shrill and miserable cry suddenly rang out. Immediately after, a saint realm fluctuation surged as if it was struggling. However, it quickly disappeared without a trace. Above the void, 3 figures suddenly appeared, and there was an indescribable shock on their faces. How is this possible? The 3 of them looked at each other, and their eyes were full of fear. They had already completely grasped the rules of this world. The irresistible power was like the shackles of the heavenly Tao. Once selected, not to mention a saint, even a sovereign would not be able to escape death. But it shouldn't be. A few days ago, when Ling Xiao and the old man arrived, the 4 of them saw it with their own eyes. The 2 young men's realms were obviously not saints. Even if they were to be swallowed, it should be them. But how to become old Ghost Su? Could it be that the 2 young men had mastered a way to escape from this strange power? The 3 of them looked at each other, and there was a glimmer of hope in the depths of their eyes. After being trapped for 10,000 years, they kept breaking through under the threat of death, hoping that one day they would have the power to break through this world. But in the end, when their hard work came to an end, they still felt despair. It was impossible for those who did not enter this situation to understand it. Now, with the appearance of Ling Xiao and the old man, the 3 of them finally had a violent fluctuation in their hearts that had been calm for 10,000 years. Buzz! The 3 of them immediately spread out their soul consciousness and covered the entire space. In the next moment, The three of them trembled violently, and there was nothing but shock in their eyes. How is this possible? At this time, the three of them could clearly feel that there were suddenly countless auras at the end of the space. Although these auras could not be considered tyrannical, the number of auras was astonishing. Slap! The gray-robed woman among them slapped the head of the demon clan expert next to her, and his head almost fell off. Jade Hanyin, you want to die? It's not an illusion. Let's go. The gray-robed woman's expression trembled, and she rushed out in the direction of the countless auras. Chapter 9:13. Buzz. Ling Zhao's eyes were clear as he looked at the three figures flying toward him from afar. His lips curled into a faint smile. With his current combat strength, it shouldn't be a problem for him to kill a half-saint if he went all out. Although the three of them seemed to be wary of each other, they would stand together without hesitation in the face of an external threat. However, now that Gu Ying was standing behind him, Ling Xiao wouldn't even put a level 9 expert in his eyes, let alone 3 level 3 saints. According to Yi Qingchan, Saint Realm experts were the leaders of the various clans and clans in the Azure world. Even in the most ancient forces, Saint Realm experts were the mainstays and the strongest combat strength. After all, those who had truly stepped out of the Saint Realm and become supremes could become the foundation of a clan. They transcended worldly matters and focused on the Tao. With Gu Ying's strength, he could run rampant in 90% of the galaxies. However, to the Taigu Ling people, he was just a servant. With the demon general as his servant, who knew what kind of terrifying existence was in charge of the Ling people. What's going on? The three Saint Realm experts stood in the void and stared at the dozen figures sitting cross-legged on the ground, dumbfounded. At this moment, they could feel that the auras of these young men and women were extremely weak. Some of them were even at the Divine Lord realm. However, what really shocked them wasn't the cultivation of these ants, but the mountains of spiritual stones and elixirs in front of each of them. Gulp! Even with the temperament of the three Saint Stage experts, when they saw the endless hills of spirit stones and the elixirs that contained supreme spirituality, their eyes were instantly filled with greed. In the past 10,000 years, they had used up all the spiritual materials and elixirs they had on them and only cultivated with the thin spiritual energy here. In fact, although the three of them had cultivated to the Saint Realm, they had only seen the lower realm and had never seen the vastness and prosperity of the Azure world. Therefore, when they saw so many elixirs and elixirs, the first thing that came to their minds wasn't to rob them, but where did these young men come from? It's him. It was only when the gazes of the three people landed on the tall and straight black-clothed youth in the crowd that the shock on their faces gradually lessened. Compared to fortune, what they desired more was to escape from their cage and soar through the heavens and earth. Since this young man could avoid the natural disaster, he might really have a way to leave this place. Buzz! Three figures descended from the sky and stood in front of Ling Xiao. Ling Tian and the others immediately stood up and looked warily at the three unfamiliar experts with terrifying auras. However, surprisingly, there wasn't the slightest trace of panic on their faces. There was even a faint trace of playfulness in their eyes. This is him. The three saints frowned as they suddenly felt like they were being surrounded. We meet again. Ling Xiao warmly smiled as he hugged Ziyin, his gaze extremely calm. Brat, how did you escape the natural disaster? Also, where did these people come from? The tall man, exuding a demonic aura, snorted coldly. His demonic eyes emitted a golden radiance, and as he blinked, an indescribable heavenly aura descended. Who do you think you are? How dare you be impudent in front of my master? Before Ling Xiao could speak, Xiao Pong stepped forward and stood in front of the three of them. A trace of killing intent flowed between his brows. The ancient Xiao clan was originally a large clan, so it was impossible for a Saint Stage expert to not know about it. Moreover, Xiao Pong faintly felt that Ling Xiao seemed to have a kind of Dao law power of the same origin as him. In other words, his usefulness might be greatly reduced. If he didn't show his loyalty now, his outcome would probably be quite miserable. Master? A bunch of ants dare to be impudent in front of this saint. Mount Ray. However, just as the demon clan man was about to raise his foot and step towards Ling Xiao and Ling Xiao, the gray-clothed lady beside him suddenly opened her mouth and shouted, "Young master, we have no other intentions in coming here. We just want to ask how you managed to avoid the natural disaster." Even with their saint stage cultivation, they couldn't think of any way to escape the natural disaster. This young man looked to be in his early 20s. Since he could escape the natural disaster, he either had a spirit treasure more powerful than a saint stage expert, or he had a powerful backer behind him. Such a person wasn't someone the three of them, who were from the lower realm, could provoke. In fact, from beginning to end, he didn't reveal the slightest trace of panic on his face. It was obvious that this young man had enough confidence to deal with three saints. If Mount Ray had attacked him, Jade Hanyan believed that the one to die would have been this demonic saint stage expert. Hearing Jade Hanyan's words, Mount Ray's golden eyes trembled. However, he quickly understood the pros and cons of this matter. He immediately stopped and gloomily stared at Ling Xiao and the others. Why should I tell you? Ling Xiao's expression was gentle. He didn't show the slightest trace of fear as he gently caressed Ziyan. You, young master, if you have a way to leave this place, we're willing to pay any price. The gray-clothed woman gave Mount Ray a look. Suddenly, a smile bloomed on her face. Any price? All right, then open your divine souls and become my slaves. I'll take you out of this place. Ling Xiao smiled, suddenly feeling a little enlightened. According to the plot, the time order in this space was the key to breaking out of the situation. As for Xiao Jiao's model, he was originally a powerhouse who had returned by accident. Behind him stood a terrifying force. So, if it weren't for Ling Xiao, this place would have been where his fortune was. He would lead the three saints out of their shackles and use the heavenly oath in exchange for their loyalty for a few hundred years. When he returned to the Xiao clan, he could show off to no end. Awesome, as expected of a man of destiny. Wherever he went, there would be fortune to be found. In your dreams, I, Shurpatian, was born with pride. How can I submit? Even if I die, I won't become anyone's slave. The sloppy middle-aged man shouted coldly. His saint aura surged. It was obvious that he was on the verge of erupting. Young master, why don't we make a deal? Jade Hanyan sighed softly. Opening their divine souls to become someone's slave was a disgrace to them. However, this young man in black might be their only chance to leave this place. Otherwise, even if they were extremely powerful, what was the point of living in fear all day long? Oh, Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows and looked at Jade Hanyan meaningfully. This woman was calm and knew when to advance and retreat. She could be useful. As long as you can take us out of this place, we are willing to follow you for 100 years. After 100 years, you will return our freedom. At this moment, in Yu Hanyan's opinion, although the three of them were in the Saint Realm, they could not be considered as the top experts in the Azure world. Moreover, in this immortal path, one's strength was one thing. One's background was another. This young man had an immortal aura. At first glance, one could tell that he was a genius nurtured by a powerful force. 100 years would pass in the blink of an eye for the three of them. If he was really the descendant of the ancient clan's sage sect, perhaps following him would be a great fortune for the three of them. Even if he wasn't, they could just go their separate ways after 100 years. It was 1,000,000 times better than being trapped here. Don't you understand what I'm saying? Ling Xiao shook his head and his face turned cold. Either you become my slave or die. Chapter 9:14. How arrogant. Boy, don't think that you can be so arrogant in front of me. Shurpatian, just because you have some background. I, Shurpatian, have always been carefree and unrestrained. I have never begged anyone, let alone become someone's slave. The sloppy middle-aged man snorted coldly. His holy aura spread across thousands of miles. Vaguely, there seemed to be a demonic glow blooming around him. However, just as he stretched out his hand to capture Ling Xiao and search his soul to find a way to break out of this world. The domineering look on his face suddenly froze. At this moment, he felt a chill rising from the soles of his feet. There seemed to be a pair of eyes hidden in the void, looking down at him. This feeling was extremely vague and illusory, but he felt uneasy as if he was being stared at by a primeval demon. Gulp. Even though Sher Patian was a saint and had cultivated the demonic magic, he still felt a chill down his spine, as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. Old demon Sher, what's wrong with you? Jade Hanyin frowned slightly and looked at Sher Potion's forehead, which was covered in cold sweat. Although the three of them had many grudges, they knew each other well. Sher Patian looked thin and weak, but his temperament was extremely domineering. Even Mount Ray, who had the body of the ancient thunder ape, had a violent and arrogant temperament, had to be polite in front of Sher Patian. But at this moment, looking at the fear in his eyes, Jade Hanyin suddenly felt a little ridiculous. From the beginning, she did not have the slightest contempt for Ling Xiao. But now, it seemed that she had underestimated this young man's means. Mount Ray, help me. Suddenly, the demonic patterns around Sher Potion's body turned into a strange black curtain, completely enveloping his body. On the other hand, his aura had vanished soundlessly, and there wasn't a trace of it left behind. But, at this moment, an extremely cold, murderous intent suddenly spread between heaven and earth. This killing intent was not concealed in the slightest. But what was frightening was that even with the cultivation of Jade Hanyin and Mount Ray, they were unable to detect the source of this killing intent. It was illusory and indiscernible, stacked endlessly. They finally understood the reason for Sher Potion's fear. No! Within the black demonic barrier, an extremely bright light suddenly flashed. Boundless Tao patterns tore through the clouds. Billions of rays of light bloomed and instantly pierced through the black demonic barrier. Sher Patian stood in the void with a look of despair on his face. He lowered his head and looked at the black dagger in his heart. His lips trembled slightly, but he didn't utter a single word. In front of him, Gue Ying was wearing a black and red cloak. His face was covered with a ghost mask. He was like the god of death, looking at him indifferently. His figure wasn't considered sturdy to begin with, but now that he was enveloped by that wide cloak, he truly looked like a ghost, causing chills to run down one's spine. Under the mask, the coldness in his eyes was actually the source of all the killing intent in this world. According to Gue Ying, his strength was at the bottom of the 9 great demon generals. However, the reason why he was ranked as one of the 9 great demon generals was not because of his cultivation realm, but because of his means of killing. Who are you? Sher Patian swallowed hard. He could feel that if this ghostly expert's dagger was half a finger more, his heart would be completely shattered. Submit or die. Gue Ying's voice was extremely hoarse. However, his words made Sher Potion's pupils constrict. He turned his head and looked at the black-clothed young man standing quietly in the distance. At this moment, there was still an extremely gentle smile on his face. Even the white cat in his arms had a lazy and comfortable expression. I submit. In the end, Sher Patian gritted his teeth and gave Ling Xiao a deep look, saying in a deep voice. Originally, with his temperament, he wouldn't submit to a young man so easily. However, just now, the moment the ghost shadow appeared in front of him, Sher Patian actually felt an irresistible invasion of the devil will. The true essence of the demonic path. He was originally a rogue cultivator in the lower realm, and he inherited the demonic path. His reputation was extremely bad. However, with his temperament, he broke through all the obstacles and ascended to the upper realm. Sher Patian once heard that in the Azure realm, there were great demons that lived in seclusion, and demonic ghosts ran rampant. He originally wanted to see how the demons in the upper realm were compared to him. Now that he saw it, his Taoist heart was shattered. One slash, heaven and earth, and the demonic clouds. At this moment, he could even feel that Gue Ying's realm was more than 1 realm higher than his. The demonic path's remarkable ability that he was so proud of was as weak as an ant. In other words, Gui didn't make a move at all from the beginning to the end. He just appeared in the void and then, under Sure Potion's gaze, stabbed that pitch-black dagger into his heart. Buzz! Soul light suddenly bloomed in Ling Xiao's eyes. It turned into a divine seal and formed in Sure Potion's sea of soul. What about you two? It wasn't until Ling Xiao turned his head to look at Jade Hanyin and Mount Ray that the two saints sighed softly. They voluntarily opened their souls and became Ling Xiao's slaves. Greetings, my lord. The three of them descended from the sky and bowed deeply to Ling Xiao. At this moment, Ling Xiao clearly saw the origins of their cultivation through the soul seals. Jade Hanyin, a third-grade saint who ascended from the venerable realm, was an expert in the way of the sword. Mount Ray, a third-grade saint, was an ancient thunder ape with incomparable strength and tyrannical tyranny. Sure Patian, on the other hand, had the strongest cultivation among the three of them. He was a fourth-grade saint, cultivated the Azure Sky Demon technique, and was vicious and merciless. Although, whether it was Gui or Ling Tian, they both said that the Taigu Ling people of the Azure world would become Ling Xiao's new support. But after experiencing the last battle in the Shengzhou, Ling Xiao had thought it through. Only by grasping the power in his own hands could he be absolutely safe. Stepping out of the Shengzhou, the order of time returned to normal. And those old things who had lived for thousands of years, or even tens of thousands of years, were all scheming people. The three saints were enough for Ling Xiao to deal with some ordinary forces. Moreover, Ling people weren't suitable for some things. He needed some chess pieces to set up the world. Yes, you can cultivate here. After all, there's still 100 years before the next natural disaster. Ling Xiao raised his head and looked at the distant sky. There was a trace of vicissitudes between his brows. Logically speaking, at his age, he shouldn't have been able to comprehend the true meaning of time. But the system was actually a cheat. Now that he had perfected the law of time, he could see the flow of time in this space much more clearly than these saints. Gui, Xiao Biao, follow me. Ling Xiao lifted his foot and walked toward the sky. Gui and Xiao Biao followed closely behind him. Ling Tian, Yi Qin Chan, Phoenix Rouge, Lin Ming, and the others each chose an area and stuffed countless pills into their mouths, completely immersing themselves in cultivation. Sure Patian and the other two's auras were shocking to these godly kings and godly marquises. According to what Yi Qin Chan had said, in the Azure world, those who were truly talented would need decades or even centuries to step into the Emperor God realm. Therefore, whether it was Ling Tian, Phoenix Rouge, or the others, they were all extremely talented. But talent was talent. Everyone knew that they were never compared to the so-called geniuses of the upper world, but Ling Xiao, if there came a day when they could no longer see Ling Xiao's backbone, this immortal path would come to an end. Chapter 9:15. Blood-red clouds covered the horizon. Ling Xiao clasped his hands behind his back as he looked at the blood-red light. Beside him, Xiao Bo frowned slightly, and there seemed to be confusion in his small eyes. This is the end of this place? Why? Why is there a life force fluctuation? Ling Xiao's eyes were clear as the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. Guiying, are you sure this is the space-time beast you were talking about? It should be. Apart from this beast, I can't think of any other creature that can use its heart to imprison living beings, travel between realms, and devour living beings to cultivate. Guiying's voice was hoarse and solemn. He didn't expect his master's luck to be so heaven-defying that he could encounter this legendary, mysterious beast in this lower realm. But judging from the size of this realm, this space-time beast is clearly still underage. Otherwise, it wouldn't have appeared in a barren land like the Shengzhou continent. Oh, it's rumored that space-time divine beasts don't have high intelligence and only know how to devour and destroy. In particular, its heart can form a space of its own, encompassing epochs. It's a sign of the end of the world. However, this beast is divine, and it's rumored that even immortals and demons can't survive against it. Is that so? Ling Xiao reached out to touch the blood wall in front of him. He could feel an extremely mysterious life force fluctuation in this blood wall. This fluctuation contained the two supreme great Taos of time and space, but was completely different from the Tao of formations and couldn't be forcefully broken by the boundary-breaking talisman. But Master, you once said that no matter how powerful a force is in this world, there will always be a weak point. All the laws in the world reinforce and counter each other. Gui Ying's eyes narrowed as he suddenly slashed out with the dagger in his hand. The supreme order descended with a loud rumble. It was as if a river of stars was collapsing, destroying everything. However, when the dagger struck the blood wall, it only left a 1,000-foot-long crack. Inside was still an endless blood-red space, as if there was no end to it. This, Xiao Pao was stunned, and his eyes seemed to flicker with divine light. He seemed to have comprehended the true meaning of the sovereign order of time. It was endless and could be destroyed by extraordinary power. His realm, which had not fluctuated for a long time, actually showed signs of breaking through in a single breath. Master, among the myriad of techniques in this world, only time is boundless. Even if the epic is destroyed and the worlds sink into oblivion, it will still be difficult to stop it. I'm afraid that it will be very difficult to walk out of this world with brute force. Not bad. Ling Xiao nodded indifferently. If brute force could break through this world, Jade Hanyin and the others would not have been trapped here for 10,000 years. But how could he break through this barrier and walk out of the shackle? Absolute speed or find the node of time and space. That is where this beast is the weakest. Just when Ling Xiao and the others were at their wits' end, a cold and clear voice suddenly sounded in their ears. The three of them raised their heads and saw a figure in a black dress standing in the air with her hands behind her back. Her delicate little face had a heaviness that didn't match her age. Wind chimes. Ling Xiao's eyes narrowed slightly, but he had a sudden realization in his heart. The so-called absolute speed referred to surpassing the limits of time and space. When even time couldn't catch up to you, you could truly be called indestructible and indestructible. Throughout history, no one had been able to jump out of time. The only person who had come close to this realm was perhaps the samsara master that Liang Yi had mentioned. But even he had been trapped in the cycle of reincarnation, and there had been no news of him since. As for the node of time and space, Ling Xiao's eyes trembled slightly. The power of Tao laws around him circulated and swept out in all directions. If not for the fact that he could plunder Tao laws and effortlessly perfect them, he would have had to waste an endless amount of time and energy just to find the node that Wind Chimes had mentioned. After all, even a saint or sovereign expert would find it difficult to truly cultivate the two supreme great Taos of time and space to the extreme at the same time. At the very least, among the experts that Ling Xiao knew of, there was no one who could do it. In fact, in the entire Shenzhou, where the primordial universe dragon was born, he had only seen Ling Tian perfect his sword Dao. Perhaps, with Poverty Zhao's luck, he would be able to find the node sooner or later as long as he spent some time. But now, with the existence of Ling Xiao, everything was naturally much simpler. But how did Wind Chimes know such a secret? One must know that when this girl had first appeared in the ancient glazed pagoda, she had been as pure as a piece of white paper. She had no distractions or intelligence, and she did not even understand the matters between men and women. But as time passed, in just 3 short years, Ling Xiao discovered that she had changed. She had become taciturn and rarely appeared in front of others. She still did not show any hostility towards Ling Xiao, but she had become more and more mysterious. The divine beast of time and space was a creature that only existed in legends. Even Gui Ying, the sky demon, had never seen one. But this little girl clearly knew where its weakness was. Was it a coincidence, or did she awaken some memories? Wind Chimes, how do you know all this? Ling Xiao's expression was calm, but his tone was somewhat serious. I don't know either. It's as if these things originally existed in my memories. Feng Ling shook her head blankly. She took a deep look at Ling Xiao before her figure suddenly disappeared. Originally existed? Could it be that this girl is also the reincarnation of an almighty? Ling Xiao frowned, but did not dwell on this question for too long. The most important thing now was to find the space-time node of the divine beast of time and leave this world. Otherwise, if the slightest change occurred in the Shengzhou or the Foliaceae, the consequences would be unimaginable. Right when Ling Xiao's figure sat cross-legged and intended to utilize the energy of Dao laws to search for the abnormality of this world, Xiao Ping suddenly sat cross-legged with his eyes closed behind him, and he seemed to have fallen into an extremely strange state. An epiphany? The corners of Ling Xiao's mouth curled up into a smile, but he didn't feel too surprised. He thought that the divine beast of time and space was most likely Poverty Xiao's fortune. A child of destiny who had been accidentally trapped in the tower for 300 years and had returned overnight definitely could not be a divine emperor. Even if he had comprehended the law of time, in the Azure world, such strength was still not enough to cause any ripples. Therefore, he must have had a fortuitous encounter before returning. Guiying, protect him. With that, Ling Xiao suddenly disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already at the highest point of this world. Then he sat cross-legged on the spot. Golden light bloomed between his eyebrows like a scorching sun, illuminating the entire world as if it was daytime. Terrifying divine light lingered in the area 100 feet around him, evolving into endless avatars that outlined a river of order that flowed in all directions. There was a supreme divine light that turned into a true dragon that coiled in the void and shook the heavens. There is also a demonic shadow that hid in the 9 heavens, stepping on eternity and looking down on all living beings. At that moment, the world's immortals and demons were all Ling Xiao alone. Chapter 9:16. Time passed by slowly. In the blink of an eye, 3 years had passed. During these 3 years, tribulation lightning would fall from the sky from time to time, punishing the world with divine might. Although the spiritual energy in the heart world of the divine beast was thin, Ling Xiao's domain contained almost all the spiritual materials and treasures in the entire Shengzhou. To ordinary experts who were trapped here, this was the underworld, a burial ground. However, for Ling Tian, Yi Qingchan, and the others, this was an excellent place to cultivate. With the law of time, 3 years here was just an instant in the outside world. With an endless supply of spiritual stones and medicinal pills, even the lazy Bai Jishi had reached the 9th stage of the Divine King realm. She was 1 step away from the Divine Emperor realm. In the beginning, the women did not feel the slightest pressure. It was only when Bai Ling reached the Divine General realm with the true Origin realm that everyone was shocked. Then, they began an almost endless cultivation. Occasionally, when they raised their heads to look at the figure who was sitting cross-legged in the sky, surrounded by divine radiance, there was resentment in the depths of their eyes. For 3 years, Ling Xiao's aura did not change at all. He did not even open his eyes for a moment. However, inexplicably, everyone felt that he was getting stronger every day. This strength did not come from his cultivation realm. It was more like a change in his temperament. He was one with the world, and his Tao heart was unperturbed. In the boundless void, only he stood above the Tao. A thought was eternal. After another year, Bai Ling finally caught up with him and reached the Divine Emperor realm with the help of the Heavenly Wheel Elixir Ocean. Almost everyone here had reached the same level. Even Yi Qingchan reached the 9th stage of the Divine Emperor realm. Ling Tian was right behind her at the 5th stage of the Divine Emperor realm. Buzz! Suddenly, there was a gentle breeze in the sky. Everyone opened their eyes and looked at the black-robed figure at the end of the world in surprise. At some point, the young man had stood up from his cross-legged position and looked into the distance. At that moment, there was not a single ripple coming from his body. Above his head, thunderclouds fell from the sky, enveloping the entire world. The faces of Ling Tian and the others changed as they circulated their spiritual energy to block above their heads. At this moment, there was only shock in their eyes. What kind of terrifying heavenly might was this? Just the thunderclouds alone covered 90,000 miles of space? Once the tribulation lightning struck, this world would be completely destroyed. Could it be that the young master intends to use this method to break the shackles of this world? But what realm did he break through to? Saint Realm. Gu Ying and Xiong Huan had their hand behind their backs as they stood above everyone, whereas Jade Hanyin and the other two had a wisp of seriousness on their faces. With such a commotion, it was obvious that Ling Zhao's breakthrough was not as simple as the Saint Realm. But how is that possible? A 20-year-old young man had stepped into the Saint Realm. Just as everyone's mind was spinning and their eyes were filled with complicated emotions, a golden lightning bolt suddenly came crashing down from the thunderclouds. It seemed to contain the true meaning of the great Tao. With the power to destroy eternity, it enveloped Ling Zhao's head. The sky shattered layer by layer as cracks spread out for 10,000 miles, as if dividing the world into two halves. Everyone felt a scalp-tingling chill rising from the soles of their feet as they faintly touched the will of death. Above the void, two more figures suddenly appeared beside Ling Zhao. One of them had a spiritual aura that seemed to have merged with heaven and earth. The other had a unique blood qi that revealed eternal immortality. "Look, brother, there are three of you now." Bai Jishi covered her red lips and exclaimed involuntarily. As for the remaining women, their eyes flashed with a hint of surprise. Even Gu Ying and the others had faces filled with shock. Even a Saint Realm cultivator would find it difficult to split into three incarnations. Moreover, these three incarnations all had surging vitality and flourishing bloodlines. At the same time, they were all different. It was hard to imagine that when Ling Zhao attacked with all his strength, how many people in the younger generation could be his match? Only Feng Ru Ji's pretty face suddenly turned red at this moment, and some strange images flashed past her bright eyes. Three young masters? If there was a big battle, it would definitely soar into the sky, right? Buzz. Finally, when the golden lightning fell from the sky, the two Taoist figures beside Ling Zhao suddenly disappeared. He did not emit any spiritual aura from his body. He just raised his head and looked at the sky. In the next moment, a terrifying scene appeared. The tribulation lightning that was originally destroying heaven and earth suddenly stopped strangely. Then, it turned into flowing light and sprinkled down. The thunderclouds that covered the entire world quietly dispersed under Ling Zhao's gaze. Is this the power of a Saint Realm cultivator? Ling Zhao raised his head and looked at the scarlet and gloomy end of the world. At this moment, there seemed to be billions of soul runes in his eyes. It was like an abyss that could destroy the heavenly Tao and seal the sky with one look. His divine soul had entered the Saint Realm. In 3 years, Ling Zhao had completely integrated the power of the dragon soul that he had not completely refined and stepped into the 5th level of the venerable realm. With the help of the rules of time in this world, his divine soul turned into billions of senses that covered the entire realm and tempered his soul sea. Fortunately, at the moment his divine soul entered the Saint Realm, he finally found the space-time node that Feng Ling mentioned. It's time to go out. Ling Zhao lowered his head and looked at the people below him. At this moment, he could see that whether it was Bai Jiro, Lin Ming, Chen Qingshan, or the others, they had all entered the great Emperor realm. Even their providence had reached nearly 10,000. Once he scattered these people of destiny to the Azure Land, he believed that they would soon be able to gain a foothold in the upper world and become famous. When that time comes, what? A certain sword sex young master is very powerful. He can kill anyone below the venerable realm? In my eyes, Ling Zhao, he is just a younger brother. What? A certain saintess of a certain pill sect is unparalleled in talent and beauty. Qingxiu, it's your turn to warm the bed tonight. Isn't it exciting? My lord, Xiao Tong and Gui Ying flew over from afar and bowed respectfully to Ling Xiao. 8th grade Divine Emperor, 9,000 Providence, time flourishing. Ling Xiao's lips suddenly curled into a smile, causing Xiao Tong's fat face to tremble slightly, and he almost wet himself. At this moment, he could feel the faint chill in his lord's eyes. It was obvious that after Ling Xiao devoured the dragon soul and controlled the time Dao, Xiao Tong's role was no longer as prominent as before. My lord, my sister is not an adult yet, no? I haven't seen her for more than 300 years. Please give me a chance. Don't worry, when we return to the Azure world, I will work hard to take down the Xiao clan and become your right-hand man. Xiao Tong's voice clearly had a hint of sobbing, but Ling Xiao only glanced at him indifferently. He waved his hand and kept everyone into the realm, then lifted his feet and walked into the distance. When the three figures appeared in a corner of this world, Ling Xiao stopped and looked at the void above his head. It should be here. Chapter 9:17. My lord, you mean... Gui Ying and the other two's expressions turned cold as a hint of excitement flashed in their eyes. Although the heart of the space-time behemoth could derive the law of time, it was not beneficial to their growth if they were trapped here for a long time. True geniuses were not simply strong in the earthly finger realm. Instead, they were those who had experienced a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Space-time note. Ling Xiao's eyes were clear, and his tone was extremely calm. The flow of time in the entire world was the same. Only this point was slightly slower. Primordial, heaven-punishing, evil god. Buzz. The sound of a saber suddenly resounded in the world. Ling Xiao slashed out with a demonic blade in his hand. It instantly turned into a demonic shadow that shattered the entire space. Boom! The originally quiet world suddenly exploded with a strange roar. A crack that was dozens of feet long quietly appeared where the saber radiance was, and then slowly closed. Let's go. Ling Xiao's eyes narrowed slightly. He turned into a graceful swan and flew out of the crack. Behind him, Gui Ying and Xiao Ping followed closely behind. In the end, before the crack disappeared, they escaped from this strange world. The void changed, and the universe turned upside down. The three of them reappeared in the realm passage. What a pity. Ling Xiao looked into the distance and saw the ripples that suddenly appeared in the place where the layers of laws were flowing. He sighed softly. With his current strength, it would be difficult to truly subdue this space-time behemoth. Even Ghost Shadow, an earthly sovereign, was no match for this space-time behemoth. Forget it. As long as you're still here, I will capture you sooner or later, Ling Xiao said indifferently. He kept Ghost Shadow and Xiao Pong in the realm, and called Yi Qingshan out again. Qingshan, I will enter the glazed ancient pagoda first. I will come out when you reach the Azure world. With that, Ling Xiao's figure suddenly disappeared. Yi Qingshan kept the glazed pagoda in her soul sea and walked into the distance. Buzz! On the 6th level of the ancient pagoda, Ling Xiao looked at the space barrier that led to the 7th level. Without any hesitation, he stepped into it. This time, he saw the imprisoned demonic creature at a glance. It was a huge figure that was at least 10 feet tall. It was bald and bare-shouldered, and its entire body was covered with totems. At this moment, there was no trace of demonic will around him, but just by sitting there, he gave off an extremely terrifying pressure. 3rd grade Exalt Realm, Tyrant Ancient Body. It was obvious that this was a body cultivator. Someone's finally here. As if sensing Ling Xiao's aura, the brute devil suddenly turned around and looked at him. It's been a long time since I've eaten fresh human flesh. Boom! Before Ling Xiao could react, the brute devil realm suddenly took a step forward. Its huge body didn't seem clumsy at all. In a short span of a breath, his figure had already leaped above Ling Xiao's head, and a pair of large hands slammed down with a loud bang. You're courting death. Ling Xiao's eyes were calm, and there wasn't the slightest trace of panic on his face. Not to mention that the demonic creature's cultivation was inferior to his, How could a body cultivator compare with the sky demon's physical body? Boom! Ling Xiao held the cage in his hand and punched out, colliding with the brute devil realm's large hands. Ling Xiao didn't use any spiritual power fluctuations for this punch. He only used the strength of his physical body. The moment the two collided, endless cracks instantly appeared on the 7th level of the ancient pagoda. Before the ferocity on the brute devil realm's face dissipated, it was replaced by a strong sense of horror. Boom! Then his 30-meter-tall body was suddenly knocked flying and smashed into the ground. A trace of surprise flashed across Ling Xiao's face. It wasn't that the demonic creature's power was a threat to him, but it was the first time he had seen someone who could keep their arms intact after his punch. Especially now, Ling Xiao's arms had fused with the demonic bones. With such divine power, even a Saint Realm expert would have their bones broken and their flesh torn apart if they were caught off guard, let alone someone in the venerable realm. Interesting. Ling Xiao smiled indifferently and stepped forward. Before the brute devil realm could get up from the ground, he punched again and firmly suppressed his ferocity. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, a series of earth-shattering noises came from the entire ancient pagoda. The brute devil realm's figure almost never stood up. He was pressed to the ground by Ling Xiao and ravaged crazily. His trump card was the ancient tyrant body. His physical body was tyrannical and indestructible. But now, under Ling Xiao's punches, it gradually showed signs of collapsing. Feng Ling sat in the void above the ancient pagoda, swinging her legs with an extremely indifferent expression. It wasn't until the brute devil realm's pleading voice that a trace of disdain appeared on her delicate and fair little face. Boring. Feng Ling's figure disappeared as soon as she finished speaking. Stop fighting. Stop fighting. Are you convinced? Ling Xiao stopped and stood in front of the brute devil realm. The great devil realm's body was already swollen and broken. Fresh blood seeped out from under his skin, making him look quite miserable. I'm not convinced, but I don't want to fight with you anymore. As soon as the brute devil realm's voice fell, Ling Xiao punched again. A terrifying demonic aura surged out, and a destructive aura quietly shrouded the entire space. Stop, stop. I'm convinced. I'm convinced. The brute devil realm's expression changed drastically. How could he not feel that his tyrant body would definitely be broken if this punch landed? Although he had many doubts in his heart at the moment, how could a 20-year-old young man possess such terrifying physical strength? But he didn't dare to ask. Open your spirit and be my slave. Ling Xiao stopped and looked coldly at the brute devil realm under his feet. Given the strength of this devil's physical body, he probably had the strength to fight against a Saint Stage expert. He had not even stepped into the Azure world, but he already had 4 Saint Stage slaves. This path was much smoother than the beginning in Shengzhou. I'll be your slave. I'll be your slave. What's the point of scaring me? The brute devil realm staggered up from the ground. In the end, he did not dare to resist and opened his spirit to Ling Xiao to plant a soul imprint on him. Come with me. Ling Xiao waved his hand and put the brute devil realm back into his realm. His figure also disappeared and appeared in the sky hall. Young master, big brother. When the women saw the 2 figures descending from the sky, their beautiful eyes flickered with surprise. In particular, the brute devil realm's terrifying physical body made people feel small and insignificant. But at this moment, he stood respectfully behind Ling Xiao. There was no longer a trace of arrogance on his face. Folded shadow, find a place for him to cultivate. Don't summon him and don't let him walk around. Ling Xiao instructed indifferently. His figure descended from the sky and stood in front of the moon of Xianyuan. Mother, Xiao we're about to reach the Azure world. What are your plans? The moon of Xuanyuan's expression was gentle, and her eyes were filled with love. Mother, I want to go back to the Ling people and meet the lord that Guiying mentioned. Then, I'm going to look for someone. Look for someone? Who are you looking for? The moon of Xianyuan frowned slightly and looked at Ling Xiao with some confusion. Gu Chao Ci. Chapter 918. Gu Chao Ci? The moon of Xianyuan raised her eyebrows slightly, and the confusion on her face deepened. But before she could ask, Ling Xiao smiled and said, "It's Nian Qingyun." Gu Chao Ci is Nian Qingyun? The moon of Xianyuan was stunned for a moment, and then smiled. I knew it. With the pride of the Ling people, how could they let you get married in the lower world? Gu Chao Ci is from the Qing Songgu clan, right? I'm not sure. Mother, do you plan to go back to the Ling people with me, or to the Xianyuan clan? Ling Xiao shook his head and asked in a deep voice. The moon of Xianyuan knew the Ling people's biggest secret, and with the temperament of the masters of the Sky Demon Palace, they wouldn't let her go so easily. I'll go back to the Xianyuan people. Shower, don't worry. The Ling people won't dare to touch me. The moon of Xianyuan naturally knew what Ling Xiao was worried about, and a cold smile appeared on her beautiful face. Good. Mother, you can go back with peace of mind. If anyone from the Ling people dares to disrespect you, I won't let them go. My son, do you think your mother is weak? I don't care what the Ling people think of you, and I don't care what your identity is. You were born from my pregnancy with the moon of Xianyuan for 10 months. No matter what achievements you will have in the future, in my eyes, you will always be my child. The moon of Xianyuan glared fiercely at Ling Xiao, and there was a rare sense of dominance between her eyebrows. Although her cultivation level had stopped at the 3rd level of the Saint Realm, it was only because of the shackles on her Taoist heart, and because she was trapped in the desolate Shengzhou. As long as she was given some time, the power of the Ren Huang bloodline would be completely revealed. Even now, with the moon of Xuanyuan's strength, as long as it wasn't those old things who had lived for tens of thousands of years, she didn't care about anyone. How could her saint blood be restrained by her cultivation level? Auntie is overbearing. Beside the two of them, Bai Jishi clapped her hands lightly. Her pretty face had a touch of deliberate seriousness. All right, now that you're in the upper realm, you can do whatever you want. Ling people's strength is such that even the Realm Lord Palace will give you 30% of the benefits. As for the remaining 70%, they'll bear with it. The moon of Xuanyuan's eyes suddenly flashed with a touch of coldness, and the aura around her spread out with a bang. She really had the domineering aura of an emperor's daughter. Mother, is the Gu clan very strong? The Gu clan controls an immortal dynasty and intimidates the 300-star regions. They are one of the top forces in the Azure Sky world. However, if you want to marry Gu Chao Ci, I think the ancestor of this clan will personally send her to you. The moon of Xianyuan smiled indifferently, but Ling Zhao's eyes showed a trace of bitterness. He still remembered that when Nian Qingyun's soul returned to her body and awakened her memories, she had left behind a ruthless sentence. As long as Ling Xiao went to the upper realm, she would pull out his tendons, skin him, and torture him to death. Although it seemed that with Ling people's strength, she could not do it now. However, if he wanted this proud, 9 heavenly phoenix to return to his embrace, it would probably take a lot of effort. I understand, Mother. You can wait patiently for a few days. Ling Xiao turned his head and looked at the people standing in the Sky Palace. What about you guys? Do you plan to follow me back to the Ling people or go to the upper realm to train on your own? Of course I'm going to follow Brother. Wherever Brother goes, I'll be there. I don't want to train. Bai Jishi raised her head proudly, not letting go of any opportunity to show her loyalty. Brother, I plan to go out with Sun Er to train. Ling Tian's eyes were calm, and there was an unconcealed fighting spirit in his eyes when he looked at Ling Xiao. Although the upper realm was peaceful, his Tao was to kill, not to comprehend. Lin Meng and Meng Yuan, follow me back to the Xianyuan clan. The moon of Xianyuan sighed softly. With Lin Meng's temper, as long as Ling Xiao did not chase her away, she would probably not go anywhere. But at the same time, with her temper, if she stayed in the Ling people or here, her cultivation realm would probably fall behind everyone else very quickly. After all, Lin Meng was taught by her. Although the heaven and earth spirit fire was rare, with the Xianyuan clan's resources, they could still find a few for her. As for Meng Yuan, this girl was clearly deeply in love with Ling Xiao, but she had a stubborn temper. With Ling Zhao's temperament, If she became too stubborn one day, it would be difficult to guarantee that she would not be killed by him. Therefore, it was better to follow her to train her temperament and temper her temper first before sending her back to Xiao's side. Ling Xiao nodded and suddenly looked into the distance. At that moment, he could feel a magnificent force suddenly descending from outside the upper realm. It was obvious that Yi Qingchuan had most likely walked out of the array passage and arrived in the Azure Sky realm. Suddenly, Ling Xiao felt a fighting spirit rise from the bottom of his heart, and demonic intent gradually swirled in his eyes. The Azure Sky realm was vast and boundless, far from what the Shenzhou continent could compare to. At the same time, such a realm would be even more exciting. It was just that no one knew what kind of secrets Ling Xiao would uncover this time. Clang, 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 clang. The sound of bells suddenly shook the heavens. Countless ancient and powerful auras instantly soared into the sky in the Azure Sky realm. Everyone stared dumbfounded in the direction of the Realm Lord's Hall, their eyes filled with nothing but shock. 9 bells, the sky demon had appeared, and the chaotic world had come to an end. In fact, compared to the turmoil several months ago, the Azure Sky realm's thousands of star domains could be said to be in complete chaos this time. Divine Battle Domain, Ling People's territory. A white-haired old man stood on a mountain peak with his hands behind his back, looking at the Foliace's realm in the distance. His eyes were calm, but there was a hint of joy. "Master, you're finally here?" This person was called Ling Songming, the current master of the Ling people, Ling Tianlin's father, and Ling Zhao's grandfather in name. "Let's do it." "Yes." "Clan Master." In the void, a 10,000-meter-tall red light suddenly shot into the sky. Terrifying auras stepped out of the divine palace and turned into a graceful swan, flying into the distance. At the same time, in the Xianyuan ancient clan's realm, a black-robed figure suddenly arrived at the border and looked at the majestic ancient city beneath his feet. This city was called Guanhai City, adjacent to the sea. It was the headquarters of the Guanhai clan, a force controlled by the Xianyuan people. Now, although the Xianyuan clan was shackled by the immortal clan and trapped in a corner, the dignity of the human sovereign was still there. Many powerhouses still secretly called it the human sovereign bloodline. This Guanhai clan master was a 4th-grade earthly sovereign, a sovereign of the sovereign realm. In this sect, there was an earthly sovereign and several 9th-grade saint realm experts. However, at this moment, the black-robed figure stretched out a hand, and a 1,000-meter-long palm print appeared out of thin air. In the palm, there seemed to be thousands of demonic runes that destroyed all living things. The entire Guanhai city instantly fell into eternal darkness. Even the 2 earthly sovereigns could not react in time. Together with the ancient city that contained tens of thousands of people, they were smashed into ashes together. After doing all this, the black-robed figure looked up into the distance, turned around, and floated away. Soon, the news that a demon had appeared in the Xianyuan clan and killed hundreds of thousands of living things spread throughout the Azure world. As the human sovereign bloodline, the Xianyuan people had always been hated by demons and demons. In addition to the strange phenomenon of the celestial demon Ancient Bell, countless powerhouses immediately gathered from all directions, trying to find traces of the sky demon. Among them, the Ling people, who were old friends of the Xianyuan clan, directly sent 2 earthly sovereigns. Looking at the city that was shrouded in demonic aura and destroyed into ashes, a grave expression appeared on everyone's faces. Demonic traces. This was the beginning of the end of the world. Chapter 919. Azure World, Heavenlywood Region. This was where the Foliace resided, and it was the only way to connect the Shenzhou continent to the upper world. At that moment, there was a sudden burst of divine light at the entrance of the array formation. A beautiful figure in green stepped out and appeared in front of everyone. In the ancient forest in the distance, there was also a burst of golden light that turned into thousands of Buddha statues. Yao Guang suddenly opened his eyes and there seemed to be dragons and tigers floating around him. In the void, Buddhist light covered the sky, and a faint Buddhist voice resounded in everyone's ears, piercing through the 9 heavens. At that moment, there was no expression on the bodhisattva's face. Although one could see his appearance clearly, it was difficult to remember. However, the red lotus between his eyebrows seemed to be shining with a demonic light, and there was a hint of evil in it. She took a step forward, and the golden lotus under her feet extended for more than 10 feet, containing an extreme Buddhist nature. The Divine Emperor did not block her first step. She was invincible under the supremacy realm. She was already at the sage realm after 3 steps. However, in the end, her aura was still unable to step out of the supremacy realm, and a hint of disappointment flashed in her eyes. "Who are you? How did you come from?" You are." Yi Qing-chan. Outside the array formation, the expressions of several foliaceae powerhouses changed drastically as they looked at the beautiful figure in green walking out of the ancient array formation in shock. Yi Qing-chan's pretty face was especially calm. She was no longer the destitute young girl who was chased to the lower world by the foliaceae. 300 years ago, although Yi Qing-chan was extremely talented, she had no background. She was just an ordinary member of the Foliaceae branch, and even her parents died in a great battle. Fortunately, she was recognized by an ancestor of the Foliaceae and was brought to the Foliaceae's ancestral land to cultivate. However, her talent was too dazzling, and she attracted the jealousy of a direct descendant of the clan, who used an excuse to banish her to the lower world. She stayed there for more than 300 years. This time, when she returned to the upper world, she was not summoned by the Foliaceae. According to the clan rules, she should be killed. However, Yi Qing-chan did not have a trace of fear on her face. Right now, she had the young master behind her, not to mention a direct descendant of the Foliaceae. Even the head of the Foliaceae would not dare to touch her. "Yi Qing-chan, you actually dared to ascend to the upper realm without permission." The faces of the Foliaceae members changed, and their eyes flickered with anger. The experts of the Foliaceae who were able to guard this place were all more senior than Yi Qing-chan. Therefore, even though this woman had once been in the limelight, in the eyes of everyone, she was now just an abandoned child of the clan. Even the ancestor who brought her to the Foliaceae did not stop her from descending to the lower realm. It was easy to imagine how furious everyone was when they saw her breaking the clan's rules. However, Yi Qing-chan's gaze was not on the people from the Foliaceae. Instead, she was looking at the white-robed Buddha in the distance. "It's not him." It was not until the Yawang was about 10 feet in front of Yi Qing-chan that a hint of surprise appeared on her pretty face. Then, her eyes seemed to be filled with Buddha's will, reflecting the 9 heavens and illuminating the netherworld. It was like the divine path of reincarnation, causing one's heart to tremble. She only looked at Yi Qing-chan from head to toe, but did not say anything else. She softly chanted the name of Buddha, turned around, and walked toward the distant mountains. The fate of the calamity has been decided. There is no protection for the common people. The Buddha's heart does not exist. All laws are in the sky. Brahma Holy Land? A trace of doubt flashed through Yi Qing-chan's eyes. With the foundation of this force, even the Foliaceae could not compare. But why did this female monk appear here? How could there be sorrow in her eyes? The fate of the calamity has been decided? Buddhism cultivates the Heart Sutra. Looking at the Buddha's will on this female monk, she had clearly reached the level of holiness. How could she have such vulgar thoughts and desires? "Yi Qing-chan, do you know your crime?" Among the Foliaceae, a white-haired old man shouted angrily. His holiness spread across thousands of miles, stirring up the clouds in the sky. He was actually a half-sage powerhouse. According to the rules of the Foliaceae, one can return to the upper world after guarding the realm for 300 years. I have already guarded the Xingzhou continent for 337 years. What crime have I committed? Yi Qing-chan's eyes were cold. The void around her was sealed, and frost filled the air. It was a chilling sight. Even if the time limit is up, you still need my clan leader to personally give the order to return to the clan. Yi Qingchan, you have violated the rules of my clan today. You deserve to die. As soon as he finished speaking, the half-sage from the folly suddenly stepped forward. Divine light bloomed in his hand, and he directly pressed his palm down toward Yi Qingchan's head. But at that moment, the girl did not move. Her green robe fluttered in the wind, and her hair fluttered. She only looked calmly at the half-sage from the Foliaceae who stepped down from the sky, and a trace of mockery appeared between her brows. Boom! Monstrous divine might fell from the sky like a river of stars flowing in reverse, shattering thousands of miles. A 1,000-foot divine seal appeared from the half-sage hand, sealing Yi Qingchan and the space around her. This seal clearly showed that the half-sage from the Foliaceae had the intention to kill her. As for the reason Yi Qingchan secretly ascended to the upper world was one thing, but there was another more important reason. The girl from the direct line who had been her enemy back then was now the young master of the Foliaceae. Yi Qingchan raised her head and looked at the vast spiritual light pouring down, and the corners of her mouth gradually curled up into a smile. What a joke! You are my clansman. You keep saying that demons should be killed, and that the great Tao is just. But in the end, the ones who tried to kill me time and time again were still you. And the one who saved me was the sky demon that you said was not tolerated by the world? What a mortal's plan! What righteousness of the human race! I, Yi Qingchan, only live and die for one person in this life. If the young master has the entire world as his enemy, then I will accompany him in slaughtering all enemies in this world. This Yi Qingchan really doesn't know what's good for her. If she had stayed obediently in the lower world, she could have kept her life. Now, that Miss Qingru is the young master of the Foliaceae. Isn't she walking right into a trap by returning now? What a pity. This person's status is determined from birth, but some people rely on their talent and covet too much. Now they're dead. The members of the Foliaceae stood in place, their expressions full of mockery. Even Yaoguang would find it difficult to resist the attack of a half-sage, let alone Yi Qingchan. Vast divine might fell with a loud boom, and boundless divine light soared into the sky, covering the firmament. Everyone shook their heads as they looked regretfully at the place where the light had spread. The layers of spiritual light gradually dissipated, revealing the imposing figure of the half-sage from the Foliaceae. However, what was strange was that this half-sage from the Foliaceae seemed to have a pitch-black ancient blade on his back. Fresh blood flowed down his back and dyed his black robes black. The vitality around him was rapidly dissipating at a speed visible to the naked eye. Everyone rubbed their eyes hard. When they looked again, the half-sage from the Foliaceae had already collapsed to the ground, revealing a tall and slender black-robed figure behind him. It was a young man with peerless celestial features and unparalleled divine handsomeness. He slowly sheathed his blade, his eyes gentle, and even the corners of his mouth curled up in a gentle smile. He raised his head and looked at everyone. His deep eyes were calm and unrestrained, without a trace of killing intent. Kill them all. Ling Xiao reached out and grabbed Yi Qingchan's jade-like hand, then walked toward the depths of the heavenly wood realm. Over there, he could sense an extremely terrifying aura. It was obvious that the Foliaceae's ancestral land should be here. Chapter 920. Boom! Suddenly, dark clouds gathered in the sky. Before the group of Foliaceae experts could react, they saw 3 figures standing in the void and suppressing them. They were 3 saints. To the Foliaceae, the 3 saints were not much of a threat. However, other than the half-saint expert guarding the array formation, the others were all god thearchs and supremacies. Otherwise, if there was a paragon guarding this place, it would inevitably attract the suspicion of other races. The massacre did not last for long before it came to an end amidst waves of screams. Ling Xiao held Yi Qingchan's hand and looked at the distant sky. Gu Ying's figure appeared behind the 2 of them. Ripples immediately appeared in the void, and he disappeared without a trace. In a chaotic battle, just now, he did not make a move. He only used his supreme divine power to seal the entire space. Therefore, everything that happened here had not been transmitted back to the Foley ACE. Ghost Shadow, with your strength, can you slaughter all the Foley ACE? Master, you only need to report your name. The people of the Foley ACE will not dare to hurt you. Ghost Shadow's expression was indifferent. Even his tone was filled with absolute dominance. Even the Realm Lord's palace did not dare to provoke the Taigu Ling people. Although the Foley ACE was a vassal of the celestial race, all the experts in the race had died in the war of gods and demons. In fact, if not for the fact that they had some ties with the celestial race, it would be difficult for this race to be ranked first. Oh, Ling Xiao nodded slightly and turned to look at Yi Qingchuan. How about we slaughter this race today? As long as young master likes it, Qingchuan will accompany you. Yi Qingchuan smiled faintly and reached out to hold Ling Xiao's arm without any hesitation. Master, the Foley ACE has a heavenly supreme. Moreover, this race has a celestial race relic, so if you want to slaughter this race, it's best to report to the race and send a few patriarchs over. Guiying looked at Ling Xiao with a serious expression, his tone somewhat solemn. Under normal circumstances, the Foley ACE would never dare to attack Ling Xiao. However, if faced with the threat of extermination, no one would sit still and wait for death. It didn't matter whether Guiying died or not. However, if their master were to accidentally die as soon as he ascended to the upper realm, all the masters in the Sky Demon Palace would probably die of depression. Don't worry, there's no need to go back. Someone will come. Ling Xiao shook his head and waved his hand. Ling Tan, Chun Qingshan, Folded Shadow, Nightmare, and 100 secret guards immediately walked out of the realm and appeared in front of him. This is the Azure Foley AC. You can leave now. If you need anything, remember to send me a message. Brother, you be careful too. Ling Tian looked deeply at Ling Xiao, and without any hesitation, he held onto Yi Sun Er's hand and flew into the distance. Folded Shadow and Chun Qingshan also chose a direction and disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. At that time, Ling Xiao had heard from Gu Zhen that Sect Master Tian hadn't died, but had just gone missing. When Chun Qingshan inherited the god of the underworld's divine body, he had been guided by the statue. Perhaps this Sect Master Tian was now in the Azure Realm. With his and Ling Tian's luck, they would most likely have a fortuitous encounter. Only when they were far away did Ling Xiao's expression gradually turn cold. Whether it was Ling Tian or Chun Qingshan, there was a trace of demonic nature in their bodies. Although this trace of demonic nature wouldn't be easily exposed, Ling Xiao had just ascended to the upper realm and didn't know the situation in this realm. He also didn't know if anyone was paying attention to the Sky Demon's whereabouts in advance. Letting the two of them out was equivalent to having a backup plan, and it could ensure that nothing went wrong. Moreover, judging from their karmic luck, they definitely wouldn't die so easily. When Ling Xiao completely stabilized himself, he could provide them with protection. In this way, with one in the light and one in the dark, the world could be mapped. As for Folded Shadow and Dream Demon, these two demons were proficient in the art of illusions. They could lead the shadow guards to infiltrate the myriad regions and become Ling Xiao's eyes and ears. When it came to setting up a plan, the sooner the better. This way, it wouldn't seem deliberate. Young master, when I stepped out of the array, a female monk from the Brahma Holy Land seemed to have been waiting for a long time. Yi Qingchuan suddenly remembered the white-robed figure just now. She had a feeling that the female monk was waiting for Ling Xiao. Yes, I know. Ling Xiao nodded indifferently. Just now, when he killed the half-sage of the Foliaceae and devoured his soul, he naturally saw the bodhisattva named Yaoguang. However, Ling Xiao had never ascended to the upper realm. The only people who knew of his existence, other than the Ling people, was probably Gu Chao Ci. Who was this Yaoguang? What did she mean by Sun Xin? Also, why didn't Ling Xiao see her appearance in the memory of the half-sage of the Foliaceae, but her temperament was inexplicably familiar? Ling Xiao's eyes were clear, and his heart was filled with thousands of thoughts. Buddhist magic had always been mysterious, and it was especially good at cultivating the heart through tribulations. Since Gu Chao Ci could descend to the lower realm as a subsoul, perhaps this Yawang had also appeared in the Shengzhou. Moreover, the Brahma Holy Land was quite special in this azure sky world. It was not in the center of the azure sky world, but in the far west. This holy land believed in the equality of all living things. In other words, whether you were a demon, a human, a ghost, or a devil, as long as you had the fate of Buddha, the Brahma Holy Land was willing to accept you as a disciple. As a result, the forces involved in this holy land were too diverse, and even the Realm Lord's palace was not willing to provoke them. Interesting. It seemed that he had to find time to meet this bodhisattva, crush the Buddhist light on her face, and figure out the secret on her body. Otherwise, once this variable appeared, it was possible that they would be consigned to eternal damnation. Young master, if you go back to the Foliaceae with me now, I'm afraid it won't be appropriate. Seeing Ling Zhao's cold expression, Yi Qingchuan did not dare to say anything, but there was a trace of worry between her brows. She was not afraid that the Foliaceae would dare to attack Ling Xiao, but she had just ascended to the upper realm today. If Ling Xiao acted too close to her, wouldn't it expose the secret that he also came from the Shengzhou? The immortal demon bell rang, and the sky demon appeared. Although it was impossible for the Taigu Ling people not to have any countermeasures, the Shengzhou was a Shengzhou. However, the Shengzhou continent was far too important. Once Ling Xiao was involved, it was inevitable that suspicion would arise. Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly, looking at Yi Qingchuan with appreciation. The reason why he had always kept this girl by his side was not only because of her luck, but also because of her temperament. Whether it was in the Four Wastelands or the Shengzhou, Yi Qingchuan could always give him some good advice, and, at the same time, she was unswervingly loyal. Moreover, although Yi Qingchuan was no longer the person from 300 years ago, she had recovered a lot of her memories. Compared to Ling Xiao, she clearly had a more thorough understanding of the Foliaceae and the Azure world. However, Yi Qingchuan's worries were reasonable, but given the Ling people's methods, how could they not place a few spies in this clan? Otherwise, how do you think the Ling people of the Shengzhou, Gui, Ying, and the others came to the lower realm? According to Ling Zhao's speculation, perhaps the Taigu Ling people were also waiting for an opportunity to make a move on the Foliaceae and completely put the spies in the main position. What? Why didn't the Ling people directly take control of the Foliaceae? Sometimes, hiding behind the scenes was often more terrifying than being overbearing on the surface. After all, the Ling people had a deep foundation and were too eye-catching. Their every move could be said to be a flaw. Sir, why don't you leave first? Yi Qingchuan bit her red lips. Although there was reluctance in her eyes, there was no greed. You're going to tell the Foliaceae that you killed that saint? Do you think they'll believe you? Ling Xiao smiled gently and reached out to pinch Yi Qingchuan's pretty face. Don't worry, I have my own plans. With that, Ling Xiao no longer hesitated and lifted his foot to walk towards the Foliaceae's ancestral ground. Yi Qingchuan only hesitated for a moment before a bright smile bloomed on her face. Yes, with Sir's temperament, how could he leave a flaw for others to use against him? Since he dared to do it, he naturally thought of all the consequences. Foliaceae, Yi Qingchuan, Embark. Boom. Who are you? Do you have a visiting card? The Foliaceae's ancestral ground was located on a majestic divine mountain. The forest on the mountain formed a sea. It was lush and green, surging with rich vitality. 7 colored rays of light covered the horizon, transforming into an immortal sun that illuminated the mountains and rivers for 30,000 miles. And in the depths of the sea of trees, magnificent ancient palaces sat there, exuding an ancient and majestic aura. At this moment, at the foot of the divine mountain, 2 Foliaceae frowned as they looked at Ling Xiao and Yi Qingchuan in front of them, their eyes filled with fear. Chapter 921. Do you think a mere foliace is worthy of my visit? Ling Zhao's expression was calm, and there was a transcendent aura around him. In front of him, the two youths from the Yi clan unconsciously had looks of reverence on their faces. With just one look, the two of them felt that the young master who suddenly came to visit them must be of noble birth and extraordinary status. If he didn't pretend for more than 20 years, he wouldn't be able to reach such a level of perfection. Moreover, the foliace was famous. Everyone in the Azure continent knew about it. Anyone who wasn't a fool wouldn't dare to be so presumptuous in the ancestral land of the foliace. It was obvious that this young man had a great background. However, although the Azure continent was vast and boundless, it was impossible for an extraordinary person like this black-robed young master to be unknown. But why did this young master look so young and unfamiliar? The little foliace, you scared me so much that I don't know how to do it anymore. Haha. May I know your name, young master? Why have you come to our foliace? The two foliace youths looked at each other. There was no longer any arrogance on their faces. That's right, they didn't know Ling Xiao. Of course, if this was an ordinary son of destiny, they would be greeted with waves of mockery, disdain, and even a fight. Then it would be the time to show off. However, the son of destiny either looked ordinary or only knew how to pretend to be a pig. But this young master in front of them, whether it was his appearance, temperament, or aura, they were all chilling. How could this be called showing off? He was obviously showing off his strength. Get lost. Ling Zhao's eyes turned cold. He didn't even need to make a move. The moment he stepped out, a force of heaven and earth suddenly fell. Instantly, the two foliace youths, who were only at the Emperor God level, were blasted dozens of feet away. Poochie! The two youths landed on the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood. The respect in their eyes had already turned into shock and fear. What did I say? This young master is powerful. Let's go. Ling Xiao turned his head and glanced at Yi Qingchuan. The corners of the latter's mouth immediately curled up into a bright smile. She took the initiative to hold Ling Zhao's arm and walked towards the main hall at the summit. Before descending to the lower realm, she had also cultivated in this ancestral land of the foliaceae for several years. But at that time, she had no background and was not of the main branch, so she was inevitably looked down upon wherever she went. When had she ever been able to hold her head high like she was now? However, even though Ling Xiao was strong and the Ling people were indeed arrogant in the Azure continent, this was the ancestral land of the foliaceae. If he behaved too domineeringly, he would inevitably attract the killing intent of the foliaceae. One must know that the foliaceae were vassals of the Celestials, and they also had the heavy responsibility of guarding the Shenzhou. Although ordinary factions did not know what was sealed in the Shenzhou continent, the Realm Master did. Once the Ling people wanted to make a move on the foliaceae, the Realm Lord Palace would definitely not sit idly by. Of course, Yi Qingchuan did not know that the Realm Lord had been missing for more than 200 years. And now, the Realm Lord Palace was already in a state of semi-seclusion. How would they dare to provoke the Taigu Ling people at this time? However, Ling Xiao was aware of this news. The reason why he was so unrestrained was not because he was possessed by Long Outyin and enjoyed the joy of showing off. Ling Xiao did not know the attitude of the Taigu Ling people towards him. Therefore, he wanted to test and see how much this race valued him, the reincarnation of the Sky Demon. All kinds of methods were based on scheming. The path to immortality was vast, and one should consolidate at every step. Young Master, although the foliaceae have declined, they have a close relationship with the Realm Lord Palace. Yi Qingchuan wanted to say something, but stopped. She was clearly worried, but she was also afraid that her young master would feel that she did not trust him enough. I understand. Ling Zhao's tone was calm. He stepped forward, grabbed Yi Qingchuan's jade-like hand, and strode towards the peak of the mountain. Behind them, the two foliaceae hurriedly took out their talismans and crushed them. Boom! A golden light rose from the foot of the mountain. The entire foliaceae suddenly fell into chaos. Several ancient and powerful auras walked out of the temple and stood on the peak of the mountain. They looked down the mountain. All the Foliaceae people gathered in the square in front of the temple from all directions. Their eyes were filled with confusion and surprise. That golden light was the Foliaceae warning of danger. Even the younger generation had only heard of it from their elders. They had never seen it before. But today, when they saw the golden light that rose into the sky, many people felt that it was absurd and unreal. The Foliaceae were the vassals of the immortal race. Moreover, the Heavenly Wood region was adjacent to the Realm Lord Palace. Who would dare to act presumptuously in the Foliaceae? Until two figures suddenly appeared on the mountain path in the distance. The Foliaceae people's eyes trembled, and a hint of vigilance appeared on their faces. At that moment, a tall young man in black slowly walked over on the ancient path. Although he did not emit any aura, there was an inexplicable sense of being one with heaven and earth. He was as handsome as jade and had a unique temperament. Even though the Foliaceae was also a large race with many prodigies, compared to this young man, it was like heaven and earth. Moreover, beside him stood a beautiful figure in green. She was as beautiful as a painting, as if she was created by heaven and earth. The two of them walked side by side. A Taoist rhyme that could be seen with the naked eye rippled leisurely. When they stood together, there was only one word that could describe it: a match made in heaven. However, two youths dared to challenge the dignity of the Foliaceae clan leader. Something happened at the Shengzhou formation. At that moment, a figure suddenly descended from the void. At the front of the crowd, there was a middle-aged man in a white robe with a dignified expression. The middle-aged man stood with his hands behind his back. His eyebrows were deep, and his eyes seemed to overflow with a clear light that evolved into endless mysteries. Yi Shanhe, the current clan leader of the Foliaceae, was a ninth-grade sage powerhouse. What happened? At that moment, a hint of coldness flashed across his face. The lifeline of the Foliaceae was the immortal ancient clan, and what the immortal ancient clan wanted was the item sealed in the Shengzhou formation. Once something happened in the Shengzhou formation, the Foliaceae would definitely be doomed eternally. The people guarding the formation have all been killed. What? Yi Shanhe's expression turned cold. Just as he was about to rage, another exclamation came from behind him. It's her! Yi Qingqian! A graceful figure suddenly stepped out from the crowd and stood beside Yi Shanhe. There was a hint of anger on her beautiful face. What? Yi Qingqian! Hearing this, the faces of many people from the Foliaceae changed instantly. Yi Shanhe's eyes were filled with an undisguised, murderous intent. She dares to come to the upper world without permission? Could it be that she shouldn't? At that moment, Yi Shanhe could naturally sense that the cultivation of the girl in green was only at the Emperor God level. She was no match for the elder guarding the formation. On the other hand, the aura of the youth beside her was heavy and melodious. Even Yi Shanhe could only sense that he had entered the human sovereign level, but he could not tell what level he was at. Of course, it was also because of this that Yi Shanhe felt relieved. No one could break the shackles of the Shengzhou formation. Therefore, no matter who the youth beside Yi Qingqian was, he should not be from the Shengzhou formation. It was even more impossible for him to be related to Tian. Cough, cough, that demon. Therefore, in the Azure world, he wanted to see who dared to be presumptuous in the Foliaceae. Chapter 922. Father. How dare she return to the clan without permission? The entire ancestral land of Foliaceae was dead silent. Everyone looked at the two figures on the mountain path in surprise. Their eyes were filled with a hint of complexity. Yi Qingqian's name was unfamiliar to the younger members of the Foliaceae family. However, it was a well-known name to most members of the Foliaceae family. In fact, many young members of the Foliaceae family revered her. It was said that this prodigy of the Foliaceae family had personally killed a prodigy of the Shao clan. Although the prodigy of the Shao clan had intentionally offended her, Yi Qingqian was the only one who had dared to kill a prodigy of the Shao clan in the Foliaceae family. It was not that the Foliaceae family could not afford to offend the Shao clan. However, it was said that the prodigy of the Shao clan had just displayed his talent and was favored by the Shao clan's patriarch. He had come to the Foliaceae to accompany his good brother's engagement. Who would have thought that? He would be killed by Yi Qingchuan just because he took an extra glance at her. The Shao clan was enraged. Even their patriarch said that he had never seen such an arrogant person. However, Yi Qingchuan did not even bother to explain herself. If the three patriarchs of the Foliaceae family had not intervened, and the prodigy of the Shao clan was from a branch family, he would not have been able to escape death. In the end, Yi Qingchuan was banished to the desolate lower realm and became the divine master of the Shenzhou continent. Only then was the matter settled. Qingru, you are not allowed to interfere in this matter. Yi Shanhe turned to look at the woman and the man in white beside her. Seeing this, the man panicked and lowered his head in fear. His name was Ji Erluin. He was originally a prince of the Divine Spirit Celestial Dynasty. However, due to his lowly background, he became the son-in-law of the Foliaceae family. Logically speaking, given his status, he was not worthy of the daughter of the patriarch of the Foliaceae family. He wanted to marry into Yi Qingchuan's family. However, Yi Qingru was jealous of Yi Qingchuan's beauty and talent. Ever since the first day she came to the ancestral land of Foliaceae, Yi Qingru had been making things difficult for her. Furthermore, even though Jiuwan came from a humble background and his talent was average, his thoughts were deep and handsome. He was also a prince, so Yi Qingru did not hesitate and sent people to capture him. Of course, with Jiuwan's status, when he found out that the one who captured him was actually the eldest miss of the Foliaceae lineage, he was so excited that he almost had a heart attack. When he found out that the young miss of the Foliaceae family had captured him in order to become Dao companions with him, Ji Erluin truly softened. Then, the two of them planned to use Jiuwan's good brother, Shao Popper's lecherous personality, as bait to peek at Yi Qingchuan bathing. Then, they would be caught red-handed and use this opportunity to humiliate Yi Qingchuan. At the same time, they would break off the engagement and ruin Yi Qingchuan's reputation. However, they did not expect this girl to be so cold and indifferent. She immediately killed Shao Popper. When Yi Qingru and Jiuwan led everyone to rush over, they saw that the scene was in chaos. It was obvious that there was an intense fight. Blood splattered all over the ground, but Shao Popper's corpse was nowhere to be found. Even though the entire Shao clan was incomparably furious, they were inexplicably hesitant. This matter ended completely with Yi Qingchuan being banished to the lower realm. However, with Yi Shanhe's experience, how could he not see that all of this was a lame scheme by his daughter? Originally, Yi Qingchuan was just a branch family member. Even though she had some talent, she would at most be an elder of the clan in the future. Yi Shanhe also could not understand why Yi Qingru would target a branch family member. However, in the end, Yi Qingchuan was the candidate for the young master of the Foliaceae family. As for Yi Qingchuan, she could only be a sacrificial pawn. If it was not for the fact that she had an old ancestor of the Foliaceae behind her, she would probably have died 300 years ago. This was the reality. All living things were equal, and the great Tao was just. In the end, identity, background, and birth determined the upper limit of one's immortal path. Pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger? 30 years to the west. If everything was attributed to fate, the world would be really boring. Father, Yi Qingru gritted her teeth and looked down the mountain with hatred. When she saw Yi Qingchuan and Ling Xiao holding hands, for some reason, she felt an inexplicable anger in her heart. Especially Ling Xiao's celestial face. Even she felt dazzled and bewitched, her heart rippling. Why? Why was there such a handsome young man standing beside her? Even if this young man was an ant from the Shenzhou lower realm, his face was worth 3/4 of a spring dawn. No, 3/4 of a spring dawn. Yi Qingchuan, you are shameless. Shut up. Surprisingly, this time, the master of the Foli, who had always doted on her only daughter, was truly angry. Yi Qing-chan ascended to the upper realm. This matter was unusual no matter how one looked at it. If she was not courting death, then she must have something to rely on. One had to know that the Shengzhou lower realm not only had the remains of the sky demon, but also the ancestor of the Foliaceae, Yi Luoyan. Could it be that Ancestor Yi ordered her to ascend? All the experts of the Foliaceae knew of Ancestor Ye's scheming methods. Heavenly talent, world-shocking schemes. If not for this, the Foliaceae would not have been able to become a vassal of the immortal race and enjoy this eternal honor. But if Ancestor Yi took pity on her, why did Yi Qing-chan's cultivation not increase but decrease instead? God Emperor Realm? In the end, Yi Qing-gru did not dare to say another word. The entire ancestral land of the Foliaceae was silent. Thousands of pairs of eyes quietly watched the two immortal-like figures slowly walking over on a mountain path, until Ling Xiao stopped and stood about 10 feet in front of Yishanha and the others, a gentle smile suddenly appearing on his face. What a big lineup. At this moment, Ling Xiao had already guessed that the changes in the Shengzhou lower realm's array formation had already spread to the Foliaceae. Otherwise, the ancestor of the Foliaceae would have already given the order to capture Yi Qing-chan. Who are you? Yishanha's gaze was always on Ling Xiao. No matter what happened to Yi Qing-chan, the reason for today's change was most likely this black-clothed youth. Graceful and calm, without a trace of panic in the face of the Foliaceae, this youth's temperament could be said to be top-notch. I have long heard of the Foliaceae's reputation, but I did not expect to see such filthy people today. Miss Qing-chan, don't worry, I will definitely seek justice for you. Ling Xiao smiled faintly, but the expressions of Yishanha and the other experts of the Foliaceae all changed. Ling, in the entire Azure world, only one clan had the surname Ling. The other clans did not even dare to have the surname Ling in their names. This was where the Taigu Ling people were domineering, and also the glory of this clan. However, Yi Qing-chan had been stationed in the Shengzhou lower realm for more than 300 years, so how could she have anything to do with the Ling people? And looking at the black-clothed youth's charm, if he really came from that clan, his status was definitely not low. Now that the Realm Lord had disappeared, the Realm Lord Palace was no longer as majestic as before. Although the Foliaceae had the title of being a vassal of the Immortal Clan, any force with some foundation knew that the Immortal Clan had suppressed the thousands of star domains in the Azure world, and there was no chance for them to ascend. In the end, although the title of being a vassal of the Immortal Clan sounded domineering to a top force like the Ling people, it was not the slightest bit intimidating. Thank you, young master. Yi Qing-chan lowered her eyes and chuckled. The flirtatious expression on her face made Ji Luan's heart tremble, and he felt inexplicably regretful. It had been 300 years, but he still could not forget this fairy-like face. If not for the fact that he had not seen Yi Qing-chan with his own eyes back then, he would probably hesitate whether or not to cancel this marriage. However, when did Yi Qing-chan, who had always been as cold as ice, learn to act like this? Bowed down and flatter. Chapter 923. Ling, could it be that you are one of the Taigu Ling people? Yishanha frowned, but there was a trace of a smile on his face. At this moment, Yishanha wanted to test him, so he didn't dare to be rude. If this black-clothed young master was really from the Ling clan, Yishanha wouldn't dare to act rashly, regardless of whether he had killed the Yi clan patriarch or not. But for some reason, Yishanha felt a little uneasy. Ling people? Shengzhou? Sky Demon? Was there any connection between the three? If everything that happened today was a coincidence, then the death of a few Foliaceae elders was not a big deal. But if the Ling people were really related to the Shengzhou, then this matter was not just a disaster for the Foliaceae, but the entire Azure world, and even the 9 heavens, would be in chaos. It doesn't matter who I am. It's just that what I hate the most in my life is those who invert right and wrong and bully others. I feel like old friends with Miss Qing-chan at first sight. Clan Master, ye must give me an explanation for her matter. Ling Zhao's expression was indifferent, but the words that came out of his mouth revealed an unquestionable dominance. You don't like people who bully others? Then what are you doing now? Do you think that if you were not handsome, no, if your surname was not Ling, you would have the right to speak to the master of the Foliaceae like this? Hit it off at first sight. Hearing this, Yi Shanha sighed in relief. With the power of the Ling people, it was normal for the youths of the clan to be arrogant. Moreover, Yi Qingchuan was one of the best in the Azure world in both appearance and temperament. It was not surprising that someone liked her. I wonder what young Master Ling is referring to. Yi Shanha smiled warmly. Even though Ling Xiao was arrogant, he was not angry at all. The Taigu Ling people were above all other clans. Now that the Realm Master was missing, no one in the Azure world dared to offend them. The tyranny of this clan was known to everyone as early as 100,000 years ago. Who knew what the consequences of offending this clan would be? Miss Qingchuan. Ling Xiao turned to look at Yi Qingchuan and gave her a gentle look. I've been stationed in the lower realm for more than 300 years. Why hasn't the clan leader ordered me to return to the clan? If I remember correctly, the ancestral teachings of the Foliaceae say that 300 years is the limit. No one from the Foliaceae family can stay in the lower realm for 300 years, right? Yi Qingchuan's eyes were clear, without a trace of panic. It was as if the thousands of Foliaceae in front of her were not intimidating at all. Recently, the Azure Sky continent has been in turmoil. There have been many Foliaceae matters, so I have been delayed for a while. Yi Shanha's eyes narrowed, and his tone was extremely cold. After all, he was afraid of the Taigu Ling people. As long as Ling Xiao left the Foliaceae today, he would have 3,000 ways to kill Yi Qingchuan. I have been delayed. Yi Qingchuan nodded lightly. All right, let's not talk about this for now. Back then, I was banished to the lower realm because I killed the Shao clan's prodigy. However, the Shao clan's prodigy had a soul tablet. I wonder if the clan leader could investigate whether the Shao clan's prodigy had really died? What's the point of mentioning something that happened 300 years ago? Yi Qingchuan, you must remember that you are a member of the Foliaceae family. Yi Shanha looked coldly at Yi Qingchuan. The threat in his words was very obvious. Just because of one sentence from Yi Qingru, I have to bear the responsibility of guarding the lower realm for 300 years. Yes, I am a member of the Foliaceae family. However, when have the Foliaceae ever treated me fairly? However, Yi Qingchuan seemed determined to go against the Foliaceae. She had no intention of compromising. Yi Qingchuan, master of the Foliaceae family. Without waiting for Yi Shanha to speak again, Ling Xiao suddenly shook his head with a smile. I've already said that I hate people who use their power to bully others. I don't know what happened 300 years ago, but from what Miss Qingchuan said, it seems that Yi Qingru was the one involved. Why don't we call her out to confront Miss Qingchuan? This, Yi Shanha's expression turned cold. He took a deep breath and said, Qingru, father. Behind him, Yi Qingru walked towards Ling Xiao and Yi Qingchuan with light steps. There was a trace of hatred on her face. Yi Qingchuan, I didn't expect that 300 years still didn't teach you a lesson. What do you want? Back then, you and Jiawan deliberately slandered me and caused me to be banished to the lower realm for 300 years. Today, you have to give me an explanation. Yi Qingchuan's indifferent words caused Yi Qingru's expression to change instantly. Give you an explanation? Who do you think you are? If you didn't purposely seduce him, why would Shao Bo enter your room? You killed him out of anger and incurred the wrath of the Shao clan. If it wasn't for the Foliaceae protecting you, do you think you would still be alive? Shao Bo and Jiluan were brothers. Moreover, this was the first day he came to the Foliaceae. How would he know where I lived? Also, when a matter just happened, you led the disciples of various clans to appear in front of my door. Yi Qingru, are you a prophet? Yi Qingchuan's expression was cold. There was a trace of ridicule in her beautiful eyes. This Yi Qingru's plan was too clumsy. If it wasn't for Yi Qingchuan having no background and being tired of the deception in the Foliaceae, how would she be controlled by her? You. No matter what, Shao Bo went missing in your room. If you have the ability, go to the Shao clan and ask them what their intentions are. Yi Qingru snorted coldly. Her brows were filled with disdain. A mere branch disciple of the Foliaceae dared to speak to her in such a manner. He really didn't know what was good for him. No matter where Xiao Bo went, he hadn't appeared in the Azure world for 300 years. In Yi Qingru's opinion, he was most likely dead. What was there to explain when the dead couldn't bear witness? I will go to the Shao clan. They still have to give me an explanation. But just as Yi Qingru was staring at Yi Qingchan with an arrogant expression, imagining that Yi Qingchan was like 300 years ago, gradually despairing and powerless to reverse the situation, Ling Xiao suddenly spoke. There were many hidden ancient clans in the Azure world. However, the Shao clan was definitely one of the most feared clans. However, Yi Qingru never dreamed that this young Master Ling people would favor Yi Qingchan so much. Not only was he willing to go against the Foliaceae for her, but he also wanted to go to the Shao clan to ask for an explanation. Ling people was strong, but wasn't he afraid of attracting public anger? I understand now. Miss Qingchan feels that she was framed by someone while you feel that she was forced by the situation. Seems like we won't be able to reach a conclusion. Ling Xiao nodded lightly, while Yi Shanhe and the rest shook their heads and smiled bitterly. Hee, we've let young Master Ling see a joke. It's already hard to verify what happened 300 years ago. Since Qingchan has returned, just stay in the clan and cultivate. Young Master can rest in the Foliaceae today. I'll order people to prepare some food and wine. Hard to verify? I don't think so. Ling Zhao's gaze swept across Yi Qingru and the rest before landing on Ji Luan, who was standing behind her. Since you all have your own opinions, let's check your soul-see memories. Everything will come to light naturally. What? Young Master, you can't. Yi Shanhe and the rest's expression changed drastically. Ling Xiao took a step forward and appeared in front of Ji Luan in an instant. I'm a prince of the Saint Spirit Celestial Dynasty. You dare to kill me? Ji Luan screamed in panic. His face was already incomparably pale. Under normal circumstances, even if he was given 10,000 guts, he wouldn't dare to make a move against Ling Xiao. But at this moment, looking at the latter's white palm that was reaching towards him, Ji Luan gritted his teeth. Suddenly, spiritual light shot up into the sky, and the immortal sword in his hand slashed out furiously. Chapter 924. You don't know what's good for you. Ling Xiao stretched out his palm. There seemed to be thousands of divine runes in his palm, revealing the indestructible chaos. Jiluan's cultivation level was at the second level of the Venerable Realm, 3 levels lower than Ling Xiao. Although this kind of strength wasn't considered the top in Qin Song's generation, it wasn't too weak either. However, the one who attacked him was an immemorial sky demon. Even if Ling Xiao didn't use his demonic body, he would still be able to suppress anyone below the Saint Realm as long as they weren't the mandate of heaven. At this moment, Yi Shanhe didn't move, and the other experts of the Foliaceae didn't make a move either. They could vaguely feel a few auras hidden in the void. It was obvious that there were experts following behind the Ling people. However, the Taigu Ling people had always been mysterious. The outside world only knew that this clan had the strength to crush billions of star fields, but no one truly understood their background. Although Ling Xiao was born in the Ling people and had a terrifying aura, Ji Luan was nearly 300 years older than him. The outcome of the battle between the two was still unknown. Clang! The immortal sword slashed down, instantly shattering the entire space. A golden light that was as bright as the sun spread out, covering everyone's eyes. However, before everyone could see the scene clearly, they heard a shattering sound. Immediately after, Ji Luan's terrified roar resounded through the world once again. No! Plop! It wasn't until a white-robed figure was thrown out of the golden light and landed in front of Yi Shanhe and the others that the entire square suddenly heard waves of gasps. Everyone looked at Ji Luan, who was lying on the ground like a dead dog, in shock. There was nothing else in their eyes other than shock. Although, Everyone knew that this Ling people's cultivation must be extremely terrifying, but they still didn't expect him to be so terrifying. Even Yishanha and the others didn't see how Jiluan was captured in one move and his soul was forcefully searched. Master of the Foliaceae, take a look. Before the golden light dissipated, Ling Zhao's cold and gentle voice could be heard. The young man's figure walked out of the spiritual light. He was calm and collected, and his black clothes were peerless. Gulp! Yi Qingruo's beautiful face paled. She lowered her head and looked at Ji Luan, who was lying on the ground with a lifeless expression. A chill suddenly appeared in her heart. Young Master Ling, aren't you being too overbearing? Yi Shanha's face was gloomy, as if he was suppressing his anger. Although Jiluan was only his son-in-law of the Foliaceae, it was also related to the face of the Foliaceae. But now, someone had actually searched his soul and turned him into a retard. If this matter were to spread out, how would his Foliaceae be able to maintain a foothold in the Azure continent? Domineering? This Jiluan is ambitious. I'm only helping the Foliaceae get rid of this problem. Otherwise, if he causes trouble in the future, wouldn't the Foliaceae's vitality be hurt? Ling Xiao smiled gently. He did not care about Yi Shanha's anger at all. The 9th grade Saint Realm was not intimidating to him at all. Of course, with the foundation of the Foliaceae, there were definitely still Supreme Being experts hidden in the clan. Today, Ling Xiao appeared here to make a big deal out of this matter, so as to observe the attitude of the Ling people. At the same time, he could also completely eliminate the Foliaceae, this hidden danger. Although Shengzhou had Ling Tianlin and Shi Er in charge, the god-slaying incident was too big. As long as the Foliaceae were determined to investigate, they would definitely be able to find clues. Only by truly controlling this clan could it be said that there would be no mistakes. However, if he wanted to destroy a vassal of the immortal clan, a hidden ancient clan, for no reason, it would inevitably cause a lot of trouble and bring about a lot of trouble. Therefore, he needed an excuse, a legitimate excuse that would make people not dare to resist. Yi Shanha gritted his teeth fiercely. At this moment, he did not know how to refute. With his temperament, how could he not know the truth of what happened 300 years ago? Now that Jiluan's soul had been searched, it could be said that it was his own fault. He could not blame others. Since young master has found out the truth, and the culprit has been punished, let's forget about this matter. In the end, Yi Shanha did not dare to say anything more and could only swallow his anger. Fortunately, Ling Xiao had crippled Jiluan and not Yi Qingru. In this way, both of them took a step back and could be considered to be at peace. As for the Holy Spirit Celestial Dynasty, he could only do his best to appease them. Presumably, with the strength of this Celestial Dynasty, they would not dare to provoke the Ling people. Forget about it. Ling Xiao shook his head and turned to Yi Qingshan. Although this matter was planned by Jiluan, it was arranged by Miss Qingru. I am a person who values fairness the most. Since the two of them caused Miss Qingshan to go down to the lower realm to train for 300 years, why not? Miss Qingru, you also go down to train for 300 years? What? Yi Qingruo's beautiful face changed, and she looked at Yi Shanha with despair. 300 years of time, for immortal Tao cultivators, passed in the blink of an eye. But at the same time, the Shangzhou was barren and there were shackles of the heavenly Tao. Once she went down to the lower realm, it was equivalent to having her cultivation sealed. Even if she was talented, without 300 years of cultivation, she would be completely suppressed by her peers when she returned to the Qing San continent. It would be difficult for her to regain her former glory. Young master, Jiluan has already been punished. Qingru was young and ignorant at that time and was deceived by him. Why don't we stop here? Yi Shanha frowned. He could not figure out what this Ling people wanted to do. Could it be that he was really blinded by lust and was willing to go against the Foliaceae and the Holy Spirit Celestial Dynasty for Yi Qingshan? Qingshan, what do you think? Ling Xiao turned to look at Yi Qingshan. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. Yi Qingru caused me to be sealed for 300 years. Just because she is from the main branch and I am from the side branch, I have to swallow this? If the foliaceae doesn't give me justice today, I'm afraid the side branches of the foliaceae will hold a grudge against me in the future. Yi Qingchan's indifferent words caused the father and daughter's expressions to change. Although, normally, if they wanted to kill a member of the side branch, it would be like crushing an ant. This kind of thing was common in any ancient clan. But if Yi Shanha did not handle it well today, the side branches of the foliaceae would hold a grudge against him in the future. This grudge might not erupt easily, but it was like a thorn that would not dissipate on its own. Yi Qingchan, do you really want to go against the foliaceae? If it was before, Yi Qingru would not have believed that Yi Qingchan could cause such a storm. But after seeing how domineering Ling Xiao was, she felt fear in her heart. In a lower realm of the Shengzhou, not to mention 300 years, 30 years was enough to drive her crazy. What do you think? Ling Xiao raised his head and looked at Yi Shanha. Although his expression was gentle, his tone was undeniably domineering. Phew! Yi Shanha let out a deep breath. The gloominess on his face suddenly dissipated and turned into extreme coldness. Ling people, I have given you face and given you a way out. But today you have gone too far. Since that is the case, I want to see if the Taigu Ling people will completely fall out with the Foliaceae and the Divine Spirit Celestial Dynasty because of you. Ling people, today's matter concerns the Foliaceae. I think you can leave. Oh, Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows and a smile suddenly appeared on his face. Chapter 925. Then I like to see how the Foliaceae will stop me today. Ling Xiao took a step forward. His black robe fluttered in the wind, and there seemed to be thousands of rays of divine light around him. Countless strange phenomena rose in the sky. Suddenly, the blue sky was destroyed and the stars were shattered. A murderous aura spread across thousands of miles, shocking the heavens and earth. On the mountain peak far away, several elders in white stood with their hands behind their backs. Their eyes were filled with a hint of eerie surprise. At this moment, they did not attack. Or rather, they did not dare to attack. No matter what position this young man from the Ling people had in the clan, although his actions today were overbearing, they were reasonable. Moreover, he was standing up for a branch member of the Foliaceae. Logically speaking, these patriarchs of the Foliaceae had no reason to attack him. Moreover, these patriarchs were all from the branch family. It was just that the heavenly Foliaceae sovereign was from the main branch. Young Master Ling, are you challenging the dignity of the Foliaceae? Yi Shanha stood in front of the crowd with his hands behind his back. Although there was hatred in his eyes, there was no hesitation. Yi Qingru was the young master of the Foliaceae. She was from the main branch. Once she was sealed for 300 years, her immortal path would be completely destroyed. Therefore, he could not take this step. But at the same time, no matter how angry Yi Shanha was, he did not dare to attack recklessly. In fact, all the powerhouses of the Foliaceae present could not attack. Ling Xiao was not more than 100 years old. He was from the younger generation. If Yi Shanha lowered his status and attacked him, it would attract the real powerhouses of the Ling people. Yi Kuei, Yi Yong, Yi Yinshan, the three of you will fight this young master of the Ling people. Yi Shanha shouted softly. Immediately, three figures walked out from the crowd. They were all around 100 years old and belonged to the younger generation on the immortal path. Although the three of them had just entered the exalted realm, their auras were vigorous. They were the real top figures of the younger generation of the Foliaceae, especially Yi Yinshan. He actually possessed almost 1,000 strands of karmic luck, and his cultivation had stepped into the second rank of the Exalt realm. His white robes were majestic, and he possessed a natural aura of the Tao. Foliaceae disciples cultivated the Taishan White Jade Sutra, a classic bestowed by the immortals. It was said that when this scripture was cultivated to the peak, one's body could be transformed into profound jade, which could be used for both offense and defense, making one invincible in the world. The three of them stepped out, and spiritual light shone around them. Streams of terrifying aura began to surge, connecting into clouds and shrouding the entire divine mountain. Everyone had already witnessed Ling Zhao's strength. Even Jiuwan, who was at the second rank of the Exalt realm, was suppressed by him with a single move and had her soul forcefully searched. However, to be honest, in the eyes of Yi Yinshan and the other two, Jiuwan was nothing. An abandoned child of the immortal dynasty. As long as he had some talent, how could he be abandoned by his clan, becoming the son-in-law of his Foliaceae family? At the end of the day, whether it was fate or not, people would always look down on someone like him. Young Master Ling, sorry for the offense. The three Foliaceae prodigies stepped out at the same time and rushed towards Ling Xiao in an encirclement. However, facing the three of them, Ling Xiao didn't panic at all. As he clenched his fists, there seemed to be 7 colored rays of light blooming in his eyes, deriving thousands of divine Daos. At this moment, he seemed to feel that the prodigies of the Azure world weren't much stronger than those of the Shenzhou world. They just relied on the accumulation of time and their cultivation levels to be slightly higher. However, in terms of talent, Ling Tian, Chun Qinshan, and even Qin Chu were enough to crush the three Foliaceae prodigies. Boom! A vast and turbulent aura piled up outside Ling Zhao's body. Layers of Dao patterns manifested in the area 30 feet around him. Multicolored light lingered and Dao laws spewed out. At a certain moment, Ling Xiao stepped out, and time seemed to have frozen at that moment. Before Yi Yong and the other two could react, the young man in black, who was originally about 10 feet away, had already appeared in front of the three of them. In the next moment, he threw out a punch, and his body split into 3 figures. It was like a dream that instantly shattered the void. Heaven and earth were reversed, and order was chaotic. The grand aura of heaven and earth converged on Ling Xiao alone. What was even more terrifying was that even with the strength of Yi Yong and the other two, they couldn't tell which of the 3 figures in front of them was real and which was fake. In fact, the 3 figures all had monstrous divine aura and a golden opportunity. After mastering the Xintian scripture, Ling Xiao could combine the 3 great Dao bodies into one and transform them at will. In other words, the 3 figures were all living beings of flesh and blood. Not to mention Yi Yong. Even a Paragon powerhouse couldn't tell them apart at all. Damn it! Sensing the terrifying aura contained in Ling Zhao's fist shadows, the 3 of their expressions changed. The spiritual light around them soared into the sky, turning into a lustrous jade light that enveloped their bodies. It vaguely formed the shape of a Dao armor, and it gave off a feeling of invincibility. This was especially so for Yi Yinshan. His talent was already outstanding, and his control of the Foliaceae scripture was far from what ordinary people could compare to. Now that he had used his full strength, Yi Yinshan was confident that even a 9th-grade exalted realm cultivator could only rely on their physical strength to break through it. Boom! In a hurry, the 3 of them waved their palms at the same time to meet the 3 fist shadows in front of them. Get lost! Between heaven and earth, there was a sudden flash of silver light that was as bright as lightning. Ling Zhao's voice was still as cold as ice, and there wasn't a trace of emotion in it. Then, everyone was dumbfounded when they saw that Yi Yong and the other two were in a daze. The white jade spiritual light on their outstretched palms quietly dissipated. 3 streaks of blood mist blossomed in the air, and the 3 figures were finally sent flying by Ling Zhao's punch. They fell into the deep crevice of the ancient forest, and there was no longer any trace of movement. Only a smear of black was left in the world. Ling Zhao's figure landed in front of thousands of Foliaceae disciples, and he stood there calmly with his hands behind his back. The 2 Taoist bodies had long since disappeared, leaving the green mountain in silence. Everything was silent. Gulp. It wasn't until a long while later that the sound of gulping could be heard from the crowd. Everyone looked at the peerless young man in black in horror, as if they hadn't recovered from a shock just now. Does anyone else want to try? Ling Xiao raised his head and looked past Yi Shanhe to the group of Foliaceae disciples behind him. However, at this moment, everyone unconsciously looked away when his gaze swept past them. Oppressive silence. The black-clothed figure was like a natural chasm that stretched across the hearts of the Foliaceae disciples. It was a kind of humiliation that they didn't dare to speak of. What was invincible? As a young man, he suppressed an entire clan. What was domineering? I stood here, and heaven and earth didn't move. Yi Qing-chan, it's all your fault. It's all your fault. Beside Yi Shanhe, Yi Qingrou's eyes suddenly flashed with extreme hatred. Immediately, a jade radiance bloomed around her body. She moved gracefully and was about to kill Yi Qing-chan with lightning speed. At this moment, the young master of the Foliaceae thought that as long as Yi Qing-chan died, today's matter would be completely forgotten. After all, who would provoke two top forces of the Azure continent for a dead person that they had just met for a day? But, just as she moved, she suddenly heard a calm voice from afar. If I were you, I wouldn't act rashly. If she's hurt today, I'll bury the entire Foliaceae with her. Puffed. Yi Qingrou's expression changed drastically. She turned to look at Ling Xiao, only to see that the young man's eyes were deep, and there seemed to be billions of Tao patterns that evolved into the ancient times. There seemed to be an invisible force of heavenly might that fell from the sky, shattering her Tao heart and causing her divine soul to tremble. How domineering was this? Shattering one's divine soul with one look? When did such a peerless demon appear in the Azure continent? Chapter 926. Master the Foliaceae, have you decided? Ling Xiao stood in front of everyone with his hands behind his back. He was cold and aloof, intimidating the entire ancient race by himself. Whether it was the disciples of the Foliaceae or the elders, their faces were filled with anger and shock. The Taiguling people were mysterious and powerful, but now it seemed that they had underestimated the power of this ancient force. A young master already had an invincible and domineering aura that could suppress a generation. One could only imagine how terrifying those old bastards in this clan were. No wonder even the powerful Realm Lord and the true immortals did not dare to provoke this ancient race. Now, it seemed that the Ling people's master had suddenly appeared after the Realm Lord disappeared. Could it be that this race had the intention to return to the world? Actually, this idea was on the minds of countless ancient sects and clans in the Azure world. But now, no one was willing to be the first to take the lead. After all, the Realm Lord had only disappeared for 200 years. If someone was too impatient, they would inevitably be the first to take the lead and get their head blown off. 100,000 years ago, the Realm Lord came from the immortal region under the orders of the Nine Heavens. He held the immortal demon Ancient Bell and suppressed billions of living beings. No matter how powerful the Ling people were, they could not stop the unification of the Azure world. 10,000 years later, the Realm Lord's palace stood above the heavens and looked down on all living beings. He built the divine pillar of heavenly fortune and created a glorious era. Since then, there were no more wars in the Azure world. The various clans either lived in seclusion or went into hibernation. No one dared to fight against the immortals. But in the end, the Azure world was the inheritance of the human race. Although there were demons and ghosts, the fate was with humans and not with immortals. Especially the human Emperor Xianyuan, who started the golden age of the human race and stole the fate of the immortals and demons. But in the end, he was stranded in the barren region of the North Desert, struggling at death's door. It was impossible to say that the human race had no resentment. But now, the immortals were the rulers of the Nine Heavens. No one dared to go against them. No one could. All the clans were waiting for a chaotic era. They were waiting for a hero to walk out of the chaotic era and lead the human race back to the Nine Heavens to be the master of this world. But now, looking at the black-robed youth before him, Yi Shanhe felt inexplicably terrified. On his body, he seemed to see the appearance of the former Realm Lord. His magnificence was unparalleled, and he was overbearing since ancient times. Those who obstruct my path shall kneel before me and die at my feet. Young masterling, you've gone too far. Yishana sighed in his heart. However, today, he could not allow Yi Qingru to train in the lower world. Of course, what Ling Xiao wanted from the very beginning was not the master of the foliaceae he giving in, but anger. Going too far, Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly and secretly shook his head. This world is really funny. When you bully others, you feel that it is right and proper. When others bully you, you are full of resentment. Forget it. Today, I will bully you. So what? Ignorant brat. Extremely arrogant. Let this old man teach you a lesson today. Behind Yi Shanhe, a saint of foliaceae could no longer suppress the anger in his heart. He stepped out and attacked aggressively. A white-robed figure descended from the sky. The jade light in his hand swirled and turned into a 3-foot-long green sword. He slashed it down furiously at Ling Xiao. The void instantly shattered, and the divine Tao's majesty spread across thousands of miles. However, at this moment, although the saint of foliaceae's majesty was powerful and terrifying, it did not contain much killing intent. After all, no matter how angry the saint of foliaceae was, he did not dare to kill Ling Xiao. After teaching him a lesson, both sides would take a step back, and this matter would be over. You dare to teach my young master a lesson? However, just as the saint of foliaceae slashed down with his jade sword, a cold and hoarse voice suddenly came from afar. A ray of black light flashed, and it was as if a huge star had suddenly exploded. Thousands of miles of the sky instantly darkened, and there seemed to be a demonic figure standing tall, stepping on reincarnation and arriving. This power was simply too terrifying and vast. Even the old ancestors in the depths of the Yi clan's ancestral land revealed looks of shock on their aged faces. Then, before anyone could react, the black light had already torn through the clouds and flashed past, shattering the jade sword in the saint of foliaceae's hand. Heaven and earth were silent. Only the saint of foliaceae lowered his head in confusion. He looked at the shattered brilliance in his hand and the wound that penetrated his heart. His eyes were filled with horror. Puffed, how dare you? Yi Shanhe's expression changed drastically. Although he had long guessed that this young master of the Ling people must have a protector behind him, he still did not expect Ling Zhao's identity to be so noble. He was actually the young master of the Taigu Ling people. What he did not expect was that the Taigu Ling people were so arrogant that they killed their saint realm elders without saying a word. Moreover, it was in public. In just one day, 2 elders of the foliaceae had died. Of course, if Yi Shanhe knew that the half-step saint realm elder guarding the formation had been killed by Ling Xiao, perhaps he would have made a decision in his heart. Unfortunately, there were no ifs in this world. People always liked to see a coffin before they were willing to cry. Buzz! Suddenly, divine light bloomed around Yi Shanhe's body. He took a step forward, and the aura around him suddenly rose. A 9th-level Saint Realm cultivator with a mighty lord in the Azure continent. The sky trembled, and billions of stars shattered. Flawless divine light turned into tribulation clouds, firmly locking down the looming aura in the void. At this moment, Yi Shanhe's entire body was like a piece of ancient green jade, emitting divine light and revealing a terrifying aura of indestructibility. As he raised his hand, an ancient divine jade seal suddenly appeared in the sky and brazenly pressed out. Buzz! Heaven and earth hummed in unison. Countless laws of order flowed from the seal, and a terrifying aura that could suppress eternity fluctuated in the clouds. However, at this moment, there was no trace of panic on Ling Zhao's face at all. Ghost Shadow's cultivation was 1 level higher than Yi Shanhe's. He was also a demon general and controlled the great path of space. Although Yi Shanhe was strong, he was only at the peak of the Saint Realm. How could he be a match for Ghost Shadow? Dark light appeared in the void again, sweeping across the sky and piercing through the sky. Countless members of the foliaceae were startled. There was nothing but fear in their eyes. Some of the weaker disciples even staggered and knelt on the ground, urinating and shitting. Suddenly, countless powerful and ancient auras appeared outside the heavenly wood region, standing in the distance and looking at the divine mountain. At this moment, they all felt a terrifying spiritual might suddenly spread, surging into a tide and crushing the ancient forests and mountains along the way. There were supreme being experts fighting. Everyone's eyes were filled with shock. Apparently, they didn't expect that in the entire Azure world, there would be someone who dared to attack the Foliaceae, a vassal of the deities. Of course, it was because the Foliaceae had a special status, and their overlords had all died in the great war of immortals and demons, so they were easier to deal with. Ling Xiao was a nobody in the upper world. Since he wanted to dominate the Azure world, did you expect me to kill one person with a slash? What are we? We're the villains of his Mua. We used the power of the Foliaceae for tens of thousands of years in exchange for Ling Xiao's appearance. We killed an entire clan just to intimidate the entire world. So, how many people in the Azure world dared to provoke this Ling people who suddenly appeared? Young Master, you're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.